It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Now, I've been focused on Prospera and the Freedom Cities discussion for a while. And I've talked about this in the last show, discussing what Prospera was, funded by Pronomos Capital, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, and a few others we'll get into, and what was really going on there, well before it was connected, as far as I could see, to anything other than sort of the technocratic, whatever I called it a trial balloon, even at that time, about what they were trying to envision for the future. Not seeing that at the time, that it was connected with Trump and the Freedom Cities push, as well as many other parts of this conversation. Today, I'm going to focus on a follow-up part of this that overlaps, which I was recently pointing to with Honduras, obviously because of the location, but again, with the clear regime change effort from Trump's administration taking place right now. And developing from that, the discussion, a lot of different points that'll be very relevant to you. And connecting a lot of these separate parts of the conversation that are taking place around this. The recent pardon he was given, or that Trump handed out from a drug trafficker, or excuse me, a pardon for a drug trafficker, while his narrative is he's fighting narco terrorists. But how this ties back to the same people. And genuinely, to put it as simple as I can before we get into it all today, I think possibly the core reason this is happening is because what Prospera needs is a government in place that will allow them to continue. Now, you may think, well, that's just one thing, Ryan. Why would they do this for? It's not just Prospera. This location and what they're doing this is going to set the precedent for every other aspect that they're engaged in my opinion. If this goes against what they're doing, this will set a precedent for all the other locations the precedent in the sense that the government's, that what they're doing is less important than I guess, what's the right word for it? Like, me, I'm no fan of governments. I don't believe governments should even exist. But the dynamic is essentially between these freewheeling technocrats who are out there doing all, drug trials with no restrictions and no regulations, versus the government, arguing what they're doing is infringing on their control or their rules and laws and safety. It's not really taken aside from my perspective, but just pointing out, let's put it this way, actually. I believe that what we're seeing are the oligarch technocrat kind of class who have always really been behind the scenes, stepping back out and sort of trying to reinitiate some kind of new direction. The World Economic Forum Great Reset part, I think, was a part of that. Trump's administration is continuing it with a different flavor. But what I'm talking about is that they're trialing, which you'll get more in the conversation today. It may not make as much sense now as we go through the special autonomous zone, the conversation they're having, the ZEDE discussion about how they're declaring these locations, how they're independent of the government structure and control. They're trying to make this sort of the way of the future, this new CEO-run country concept, but it's way more intense than that. And Trump is all about it. So going back to Honduras and the regime change, who he's supporting, and how brazenly he's putting it out there, ask yourself whether that's in any way America first, in any way in the interest of Americans, but even on top of all of that, that he is willing to stand up and do all of this for the interest of a corporation, or rather what I think is a corporate-run, globalist, technocratic, Zionist agenda that's overtaking everything, it seems. But other than that topic, which I think runs through everything we're talking about today, I'm going to start with a point about the DC shooter that I didn't want you to miss, and it just goes deeper into the background. And it's really not even, I don't think any of these are truly partisan when it comes down to it, with a few exceptions. But in this case, it is clear that this is a government-driven, like I'm trying to show people, that it's not one side or the other, but rather an entity that's using people like this and then tossing them aside when they're no longer important and not doing anything, not upholding their side of their agreements. And that, of course, that overlaps from an American perspective with what they're doing in Afghanistan, still, by the way, and have been doing, and what, that does to the rest of the world. But it's important to see what the arguments are and where this is coming from. We're going to talk about Second Amendment and Donald Trump and how gun rights gun rights groups, many of the most prominent, are seething with what he's currently doing with a recent act that they're trying to, people expected it to go away, but they seem to be continuing it and making it, and kind of opening the door for a lot more regulation. And we'll go into that in depth. But the interesting part, as Derek just covered, is that these groups are calling this the most anti-Second Amendment argument that from any Republican administration. And on top of that, what they're saying is that what they're doing to these gun rights groups who once supported them is opening the door to an unprecedented amount of influence in your life. This is coming from Republicans. This is coming from gun rights groups. Important to understand that. And we'll go through why that's so important. We're going to talk a little bit about the two-party illusion within all of this, which is always important to highlight, and how this is coming together between these conversations and trying to distract you from everything. A little point of humor and importance around Kash Patel and what's going on around him today, which is kind of incredible, but it's not new, as you've been hearing from this platform, that he's out of his depth. And that's, I felt that way the first time I saw him and his actions following up. It became sort of a talking point recently. And then Trump came out and said, I stand by him and I support him. He's doing great. And I think he's going to get fired. Even before that, but Trump saying that, and now where it's going, I think this is clearly going that way. We'll talk about that, talk about the Epstein files, overlap with all of that. And from the Prospera point, getting into Venezuela as well, and Honduras, and regime change tactics, a brief point about Somalia, and some other points. But let's get into this to start with a shout out to Jason Bassler, who is now back to doing some good clips for TLAV. And I would love to get Brock back doing the same thing. He does such excellent work as well. The more support you bring to TLAV, the more we can broaden out. So this is Jason Bassler doing some clips, trying to get you guys some of the, more of a truncated clip version of some of the stuff we covered. This was about the DC shooter and the simple point, which is so much pushback, that Trump's administration granted amnesty for the person we're talking about in 2025. And yes, it was Biden's policy that brought him in the first place. The way they're trying to make it about one versus the other, or really only one from the Republican side, it's as dishonest as damn near every other topic we're going to get into. But I wanted to first just point out that this is going to continue to happen more. And check out, keep an eye out for the clips, links included, and make sure you share these. And as always, Jason includes the full link so you guys can check out all the source material. Just want to shout that out so you guys see it's happening again. We're trying to do our best to, hear what you guys want and put out clips so you guys can see, and in hopes that people will try to take the time to watch the longer information. But shout out to his great work. But on that discussion, here's the show we did from the 28th. DC shooter granted amnesty under Trump, and U.S. citizen released from Israeli prison after 9 months, which seems to have just blipped off the map. Like, the fact that an American citizen was held for over 9 months is enough. But the third generation American, what was done to him, he lost half his body weight. There's basically zero commentary from America First Republicans. And now it's over, apparently. And they barely covered this, even from the corporate media. Blows my mind. I mean, not really, to be honest, but it's there if you want to check it out. And I'll continue to reference Ibrahim and what he went through, because it's such an obvious example of the hypocrisy in all of the government. And we'll make this point a couple of times today. But the idea where you have these really clear examples where, if what we are told is the truth, that the Democrats are out there trying to do everything they can to bring down Donald Trump, and then, the same thing in reverse, that they're just at odds with each other all the time. And then when there's a golden opportunity, something that is shockingly clear, and even something like the Second Amendment point we'll get to, that's where I'll make that in a second, where the Democrats should be like, oh my God, see, look. But the thing is, in many ways, Democrats want to see guns removed. But what's interesting is they should use that as a way to say, see, the Republicans are lying to you. At least we're being honest about what they don't. And there's plenty of examples like this where the side that's supposed to be like frothing at the mouth to go after Trump lets a major asset go to waste. And what that shows you is that these people are not really at odds with each other, or at the very least, the ones that are dictating what they can and can't do are not. And I think you get the point there. But I'll include this show. I thought it was a good one on a lot of different topics. But let's start with this article from the Rolling Stone. And this is, what we're going to get into with this segment is essentially what I was discussing in the last show. The reality of the connections to the Zero Unit, the CIA, and numerous other points. This just kind of broadens this out and shows you that this person was struggling. Now, this is not about trying to say he was the good guy. Who knows? I don't really know. I would never speak to people's intentions and feelings and emotions, because I'm not a ridiculous person trapped in the two-party paradigm. But what's important to recognize is that whether you think he was out there doing good things or he was taken advantage of, the point is that this government used him and then dropped him. And after bringing him to the United States, both Trump and Biden's administrations ignored him, took advantage of him. And arguably, this is where this comes together. It seems that he lashed out because of it. Now, there's obviously potentially tons of other aspects to this, including whether this was used or generated or driven. But that's not the point for the day. We went over that in most part in the last show. But this is from Rolling Stone, fellow unit member, so somebody who knew him and worked with him in the Zero Unit CIA group, which was known for wild human rights violations. And regarding this was in Afghanistan, we'll have a point that overlaps with the UK that shows you that this has never really stopped and they're still operating in Afghanistan. But fellow unit member says alleged DC shooter felt abandoned by the CIA. Well, tell you what, if you're working for the CIA and you don't understand what they are and what they might do, probably should, it's kind of might be kind of facetious, but obviously the CIA, doesn't have scruples. They don't tend to really care about upholding their obligations and laws and international regulations. I mean, these are things that these groups have proven over the years that they don't care about, usually in the name of national security and freedom and whatever else, and then proven later to be the exact opposite, like drug trafficking, which we'll get into in a little bit. The Afghan who served as the U.S.-backed Zero Unit struggled with apparent mental illness after migrating to the United States. Now, in a minute, we're going to get into the argument coming from Cristian Nome that he was radicalized by people in this country, or more specifically, depending on how you want to take what she's saying, radicalized by immigrants within the United States that he was allowed to be around. It's an incredible argument, which could certainly be true. But what I think is interesting is they're trying to make this about the narrative they want you to fixate on, as opposed to the always narrative, which is consistently there, which is that people are being radicalized by the incredible action. I don't even mean I shouldn't even use that term because it's weaponized, that Americans, people around the world, are acting out because of what the U.S. government or any government that's killing your family in front of you is doing in the world. Americans included, by the way. So you have American veterans who come back and are disgruntled about the way they were used, and then they're turned against and they're called enemies and terrorists. And this is how it always goes. And so you can continue to see this. Whether you want to call it blowback or anything else, it's pretty consistent to see that what they're doing in most ways you can look back through are not legal. Are in fact the opposite of what they're claiming, and they're there for resources. They're there for control. They're there for any number of fruit companies in South America. And so we have people like this who realize that, including Americans, that causes them to act out. I'm not saying it's justified. Somebody could take out violence on another person, but it is understanding rather than it's the logic in their mind of why they would do it. So it says the alleged shooter of the two National Guard members, it's Ramanullah Lakanwal, was struggling with mental illness, his abilities to, which is the narrative anyway. Now, I'm not going to disagree with that. It's pretty common for military personnel, but let's note that this is being added by an American media association that might want to make him seem as a lunatic as opposed to somebody who was either made to do it or acted out because of what they did to him. Worth considering. But it says was struggling with mental illness as his ability to support his family, which is an important part of this. And according to an Afghan veteran who fought with him, his pleas to help to the CIA went unanswered. And it really bothers me, actually, this part of it all, because it just shows you how little they care about their assets that they are using to, putting their lives in the risk or on the line for what they're trying to accomplish. And then when they need something, they drop them. It happens all the time in U.S. foreign policy. Lakanwal, a 29-year-old Afghan national, served in a CIA-backed Afghan force unit known as the Zero Units. We went deeper into what they did, and what happened around that in the last show. He also seems to have felt abandoned by the U.S. government. Quote, this is somebody who worked with him. He's very, and it's broken English. It's sort of translated and corrected. It says he's very sad, depressed. And the person who worked with him in the unit, his unit mate, who is not a native English speaker, said he's very worried. This problem, he'd say, I am working 9 or 10 years with the U.S. government. They never answer my phone calls. After the Taliban prevailed in America's longest running war, despite the narrative from all administrations being the Taliban was why they were fighting in Afghanistan, which we know that's not the case, like any other case that they're involved in, Lakanwal resettled in Bellingham, Washington, with his wife and 5 sons in September 2021, so Biden's administration. His migration was aided by the Operation Allies Welcome, a Biden-era initiative to resettle vulnerable Afghans, particularly those who worked alongside U.S. forces and faced reprisals from the Taliban. So imagine fighting the Taliban, or at least in some cases being adversarial to them, and then having them leave them in control. There's a lot of ways that this is, just another example of how people were double-crossed in all this. And it turns out they're not really fighting the terrorists they claim were terrorists. They're in fact working with them, funding them. This is the history, if you understand this. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the whole thing. The struggles to start over leave the war behind, and find work wherever present. Laconwal was fired from his job at a laundromat because he lacked a work authorization card, despite being approved for asylum and authorized to work by the Trump administration, according to his former unit mate who fought alongside him for more than a decade. So this jumps way to the forward, and he'll make a point clearer in a second. But what they're saying is, in this administration, before this happened, he was frustrated because he was trying to work after he risked his life, according to the narrative, for the American agenda, which is not for American interests. And he couldn't even get an authorization card to work because Trump's administration that gave him asylum wouldn't let him get one. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Not in the sense, not that it adds up, that it's logical, but this is what they've been doing. So that he can't get it despite even working for them, it adds up with every other belligerent thing they're doing. I wanted to make one quick point before I get away from it and forget, that I will talk about in an upcoming show. Where was that? Right here. Actually, now I'm forgetting why this came up in my mind. I'm all clued anyway, since I'm grabbing it. Oh, shoot. Hold on. So this came out in this was a post by, what was it again? Oh, Israel Exposed. Oh, that's right. It was just my point about funding terrorists, and I just include this. I often point to the watch-along series, rather just the series of James Corbett of the Al-Qaeda history. That's important. It'll open your mind, and you'll never be able to unsee the reality of it. But Israel Exposed put out a great clip here saying, former CIA Tel Aviv station chief admits the U.S. and Israeli Mossad work hand in glove with terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I mean, that may seem crazy to you or unbelievable that it's being said. As I wrote, anyone worth your time has been telling you this for years. It is just about one of the most provable things in this conversation, not just because of the medical treatment and the flying them around and helping their families and, I mean, just insane levels of stuff, but because you can prove they literally built and worked with and have operated alongside them in almost every field of war that I can see. Yemen, Syria. It's just worth noting. Now, I'm going to, in another show, possibly tomorrow, we're going to get into more of this, more of the, Israel overlap, as well as just the updates on Gaza. But back to this point. The struggles to start over, leave the war behind, were ever present. He lost his job from the laundromat because he lacked work authorization. And this is after Trump gave him the asylum. About a month ago, Laconwal told his unit mate that his inability to work due to missing immigration paperwork meant his family couldn't afford rent or food. This was a month ago. So now he's in this country after at least feeling like he put his life on the line for the American agenda. He's not allowed from the government that gave him asylum to get a work authorization. His family can't afford to eat. That kind of desperation drives people to do desperate things. And this, again, is not to say it makes sense and I rationalize it. I'm just simply pointing out why people get to this place. And instead of going, he was an immigrant who was radicalized by terrorism, or he's a lefty maniac, or just diving into the partisan narratives, it's easy to see that there's much more behind all this. He resorted to borrowing money from friends and former unit members. And during the conversation, he broke down in tears from frustration and desperation, his unit said. His unit mate said Laconwal sought help in June from a CIA program designed to aid zero-unit veterans with immigration issues. Rolling Stone reviewed a screenshot of the group chat in June where zero-unit veterans shared information with a CIA representative about ongoing issues. Laconwal posted messages asking for help for all the reasons we just highlighted, that he's struggling, that he's mentally challenged with all this. And that's the wrong way to frame that, like that he is having mental issues because he's, what we'll get into more, he's actually dealing with, what do you call it? I'm blanking on the term for military when they go through that, after they get back and they can't reassess. I forget what it's called, but they look at me in the chat. You guys, I'm sure will know it. I just can't remember it, but that he's dealing with something like that. Not that he's necessarily losing his mind, but that he's going through what many military people go through when they come back from war. Give me the name in the chat if you can remember what that's called. It's basic. It used to be called shell shock. I forget. Let me know. It drives me crazy. PTSD. Thank you. Love our chat. But so the point is that it's that kind of issue he's dealing with. And so he is struggling, can't feed his family, reaches out to the people that he's supposed to go to say, hey, I'm struggling. And they won't even respond to his messages. His last post went unanswered. And guess what? They've now verified that not only did it not get answered, but that it was deleted by the administrator of the chat. So not only are they pretending he's not saying that, they're hiding that he needs help. Why would they even do that if this is some kind of, well, obviously because it looks like it ended up in front of Rolling Stone, but that it was a CIA conversation and you're deleting that? These people don't care. Now, look, it could be that this guy's a terrible person. It wouldn't change what I'm trying to say about what the U.S. government does to its assets. And you guys, as Americans, we are all seen that way. If you haven't picked up on that by now, look back through every possible agenda you can, and it'll become very clear. Following the shooting in D.C., President Trump called it a terrorist attack. Right? And just the interesting overlap and the blame on Biden was the only real push, despite the fact. And obviously, we saw the argument that, what are you, a stupid person? That's just, he's flustered. I mean, that's not an argument. Clearly, that's meant to get his team to go, yeah, dumb Democrat. At the end of the day, it's clear that there was accountability here for both sides of this. And if you're going to be honest about who has more accountability, probably the last one to allow him to stay in the country, the last one to vet him. But yes, the government at large, both Biden's side of it and Trump, are equally responsible for what this is, clearly. And it says, after arriving in the United States, the zero-unit veterans were vetted again before receiving special immigration visas. Now, who's to say whether that was the case, whether they were truly vetted? This is just what the reports are, and we should never trust reports that come from the government. Always, or anything for that matter, question everything while considering all possibilities. But the reality is that they're claiming he was vetted extensively. Both this point and if they gave him asylum, that means Trump's administration vetted him too. But they're saying that he was given extensive vetting before receiving the status to come to the country. And it goes on to say, I think it's the next one. It's the next article, I think. The point was that they apparently, according to reports, were vetted more than just about any other process because of what the overlap was. My point in earlier shows was that we're dealing with assets here. We're dealing with intelligence. And I don't believe that they want to vet these things. I don't believe that they want people to be, I don't think they want people to look into the kind of stuff they're doing and what their backgrounds are. So the vetting process probably just becomes non-existent. And if you go, what about they're bringing bad guys in? Well, you don't pay attention if you think they care about bad people being in the country. Clearly, they are bad people, and what they're doing is working with the people in this country to manipulate you. Now, that's not ubiquitous. That's not every agent in every group. But again, we need to start being better students of history and looking at what our government, even what you can prove that they've done. And plenty more than what we can prove is out there. But just what we can prove. And sure, you could argue this administration's different, but you'd be wrong. But you can look at how often that's the case. And so we need to learn from the precedents here. What do they continue to do? How often they've lied? And here we are, where we're in a position where most times that's the case, then we should be looking at this going, probably, but don't assume. So the next article goes into Noam's overlap, and it says, National Guard shooting suspect radicalized in the United States. Isn't it an interesting argument? So wouldn't it be that he's radicalized by the terrorists in other countries that you're fighting? Are you actually arguing that Americans in this country, or even people that are allowed within the country, because I think that's where they're trying to line it with the immigrants that have been allowed in by Biden alone, but they're arguing that this is the most dangerous place, right? I mean, if you're telling us he worked with the Taliban or a lot, in the similar field of war with them and overlap with them, or that he worked with the CIA zero units, which were doing horrible things, and it's people in this country that radicalized him when he came back from doing those things. That's just a stupid argument, in my opinion, on its face because of what they were conducting. Probably him murdering children probably did that. But it says U.S. authorities believe the Afghan immigrant accused of ambushing the National Guard members was not radicalized until after he came to the United States. See, Biden's fault, I guess. And it says Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said. Noem said authorities think alleged shooter Lockenwall was already living in Washington state when he became radicalized. That's a very weird statement. What do you mean? So we know he was living in Washington. That was proven. That's a public point. But you're saying he was already in. So your argument is simply that the radicalization took place in that one location in Washington recently, apparently, because there's an immigrant population there. I mean, I just don't understand what the argument is. Is it that by inherently that immigrants are radicalization or are capable of radicalizing people because they're not from here or that they're brown? I mean, people are potentially radicalized. People are potentially radicalizers. It's the idea that we ever have made it about one thing or the other, one group, one race. That's the trap in all of this, guys. And so at the end of the day, what she's simply saying is that Americans, or rather people alongside them, radicalized him here and he acted out because of it. So she's aiming the bullet, the crosshairs on you guys, on us, on Americans, or at the very least, what's happening within this country. That is what we've been telling you for years. It's just becoming more and more apparent with everything they're doing. They're aiming at you. They're aiming at us. Or rather, when they go, we're surveilling for illegal immigrants. Oh, guess what that means? We're surveilling literally everybody in this country to get the immigrants or not. But let's not forget, regardless, they're surveilling everybody. Iris scans and face prints and license plate readers. But that's for the immigrants. Don't worry. Again, guys, it's a special kind of willful ignorance right now to be, I mean, even if you think they're not doing that, how long until a Democrat administration gets in that you guys are convinced are the only bad guys in the room? Certainly going to happen at some point. Continuing. He was granted asylum in April by Trump's administration. A government file reviewed by Reuters showed, and this has been repeated by many different platforms, question it like you should anything. We believe he was radicalized since he's been here in this country, Noam said. We do believe it was through connections in his home community and state, and we're going to continue to talk to those who interfaced with him, who were his family members. Of course, because that's the logical direction to go in. Now, look, these people live in the country, so there could be some that are American citizens. So my point is, I'm not sure whether she's trying to make it about people living here or, which I think is more likely, just that other Afghanis who are in this country radicalized him, I guess, to act out and take out the military. Which, first of all, if there's no evidence to back that up and it's just a broad assumption because immigrants are bad, then these people need to be called out, like everything else they're doing. But if it ends up being something more, we need to think about what he was doing in Afghanistan and what would be radicalizing to a person that you're going to be shown that the government, like, think about it like this. What exactly would they be talking about? Probably that we're going, look at what they're doing to Afghanistan. Look at TLAV is showing you that they're destroying your country. They're actually lying to you. They're stealing opium. They're taking resources out of the mountains, right? And then he gets angry about it. And then that's being radical. No, that's being aware of what they're doing. Now, acting irrationally, acting violently, that's not justifiable in my mind. But the radicalization takes place when you go overseas and are convinced you're fighting for freedom and then bomb a bunch of children in their beds, which is one of the examples of what they're talking about here. That's what they're doing. And then people are haunted by that, like you're seeing from Israelis. Even though they're supporting what they're doing, they're going through all kind of mental problems. So this is them trying to pit it back to the people they want you to focus on. They're just shameless, guys. And it says anyone who has the information on this needs to know that we will be coming after you and we will bring you to justice. Oh, that's a great way to get people to come forward with information. To me, that's her going, nobody say a word about this going forward. We set the tone, now move along. Because if anyone comes forward with information, we're going to look into you. That's what she's doing. That seems pretty weird to me. Now, overall, you get my point here. I think this is being manufactured. Whether that was an organic event or not, it's about trying to use whatever's happening to drive in their narrative. But the point not to miss in all that is that this is not new, guys. They've been doing this to other countries and other people, and now they're doing it to you. Now, a quick point to remember, when that first took place, well, let's just say this is the first one I saw. What did Jones come out and do? Who shot the National Guard troops? Before we even knew anything about what was happening. He said, who shot it? Communist, trans, Muslim, Antifa. Ridiculous. As Israel's supposed says, where's the Israel option? You know, Jones is very carefully crafting the way you're supposed to look at this. I said, the new media, ladies and gentlemen, there's no benefit to urging assumption, of course, within Alex's acceptable partisan parameters, of course. There's no benefit to urging assumption well before we have the information other than narrative control and propaganda. If you take a second and think about it, that's obvious. There's not a joke being made here. It's a simply, you're setting the table. This is what we're looking for. Now, even if you argue that's the most consistent act, I disagree with that, frankly. If you really look and don't just use your partisan lens, those options, communist, trans, Muslim, Antifa, are a fraction of the real discussion. But they do exist. Trans probably more than any of them, but it's the way that they overfixate on the one thing they want to talk about is just painful, guys. And it's easy to prove in almost every conversation. And you know my coverage of the trans conversation, it was very clearly weaponized, and some of these people are quite dangerous, not because of their personal life choices, but because of what's been done to them. But overall, what we're seeing here is an effort to try to make that couched into what they want you to see. And then guess what? Like 20 seconds later, Laura Loomer did the same exact thing. Communist, Muslim, trans terrorist, furry, or Antifa. They're just repeating what they're being shown to talk about. How lazy. And of course, now it turned out to be an Afghan CIA veteran. Where does that fit in? Is he a communist, a Muslim? Possibly, but it's all about trying to create the idea that this is exactly what you want it to be. These people are just manipulative, guys. Here, Jonathan Cook points out from the Afghanistan overlap. Oh, and to make it clear, by the way, if you're trying to argue out there like they're both doing, because they very clearly idea of where this took place in the overlap, that if you think because somebody is Muslim or Jewish or whatever it is, that therefore makes them potentially a bad person, you've just lost the plot, guys. It is not more indicative to be anyone. People are radicalized in any number of ways, and people in any religions have shown extremism across the world, as far back as you want to look. Christian, Jewish, Muslim, anything. and to argue that because Muslim, therefore, this is what they're trying to create. Jonathan Cook also points out from a UK overlap, a whistleblower has revealed that SAS units in Afghanistan shot dead a sleeping couple in a bed, badly injured 2 toddlers with them, killed a group of women and children under a mosquito net, took existing prisoners along on raids so they could be executed as though they had posed a threat, so creating the illusion they were fighting people elsewhere, placed weapons on the bodies of civilians, and they had illegally killed to justify their murder. This is the SAS. This is like high-level UK intelligence operations. This went on for years, he writes. Senior officers systematically covered up these war crimes. This came out in The Guardian. This is from November 30th. Special Forces chief tried to cover up concerns. Now, the reason I'm including this in the segment is you'll quickly find out when you read the article that the timing is perfectly overlapped with what we're talking about. So this is not a unique one-sided thing. And people this is the kind of stuff they were doing. Now, you can read reports of 0 units like I did in the last show. It's the same stuff. Horrible human rights violations. This is what your government has been doing around the world. Why do you, I wonder why people are upset with them. And so here is just another overlapping point to show you that this is the kind of thing that they're doing with these people all around the world. And they all seem to be okay with that, but are hell-bent on stopping you from pointing out Israel doing it because you're racist, or, trying to pretend they're on your side while doing everything they can to disarm you. So let's talk about the overlap. First of all, the discussion from this of people, actually, you know what? I move these things around. Oh, this is actually supposed to be here. So let me do that. We'll come back to it. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I'll move the picture. The point was this picture. Number of arrests. Russian collusion, 0. January 6th, 0. We'll come back to it. We'll get into a segment about people continuing to pretend like he's doing everything. Now, this is where I want to start with the discussion of this post. Now, Derek put out a great article. Gun rights groups condemn Trump DOJ for defending National Firearms Act. And I'll go through some of that. And what I've been doing lately, I ended up doing this because for some reason our websites, we're still going through a process of change. We're trying to reboot it and revamp it because there's, long story, all kind of weird stuff happening in the background. That posting in video embeds somehow don't seem to work all the time. So I just posted on Twitter and embed it to make it easier. But I did this just before the article to make sure that we got this included. And the post, which you might have seen, which got at least for TLAV, got pretty damn good reach. And it also got bombed by a bunch of really, really immature, childish partisans who don't understand, that's AI, that's fake. Trump never said that. Just the dumbest arguments in the world. Donald Trump, I wrote, has advocated for taking guns away from American citizens in 2018. And in case you're missing it, also in 2025, without due process. I'll play them both for you. And for those constitutionally challenged, the whole point of due process is that it's given before the action. To do it afterward, it invalidates the entire process because action's already been taken. Due process is meant to be the justification for the taking or the action, whatever it is. And then on top of that, if we're going to argue like people are, it's only about mental illness, right? Well, first of all, it doesn't matter in the context of shall not be infringed. Because there's laws created does not make it constitutional. To a response in somebody in the chat, when they said, it's a federal law, look into it. I said, okay, so you're telling me that if Congress today passed a federal law that said you can't own a gun, you'd be like, well, the law, you guys are absolutely blinding yourselves to the one side of the paradigm. This is a problem. And regardless of the justification, it is unconstitutional. And I'll make that point with the other examples, like he said about the internet or the flag. This person either doesn't understand the Constitution, if ever even read it, or clearly just doesn't care. And if we're not being honest about this, how is be honest about anything? So clearly what he's doing here, guns first, due process later, is a shocking violation. So let me play these clips for you first, just to set the table, and then we'll get into Derek's article and some comments. This one is from 2018.
Individual is reported to be a potential danger to themselves or others. Allow due process so that no one's rights are trampled.
I want to make a quick point here to overlap with the two videos. First, who decides that? Oh, the government does. Great. So just because you guys pretend you can trust the current administration, what happens when the next one comes in? But, the adults in the room can recognize that the government lies to you regardless of the partisan side. So how long until they just go, oh, but you're dangerous because you said the wrong thing about Israel, or you're dangerous because you said the wrong thing about Trump, or you're dangerous because we don't like what you said and did. And so we argue you can't do it. And they make the acceptable window. What do you think all the partisan screamers are going to do? He was dangerous. Trump said, just like everyone does in the partisan sides. And then he goes on to say, give them due process, right? Before them their rights, because Mike Pence was aware of that. But clearly he was okay with this. So that's crazy to me. But he at least tried to make the selling point that don't worry, due process will be given. And this is when Trump then argues, but let's do due process second, right? When we get to the second video with Pam Bondi, it just is such an interesting comparison to watch Bondi struggle to make it sound logical. At least Mike Pence was trying to go, we have to do that first. Now, wait for the overlap. But let's start this again. I won't jump in.
Individual is reported to be a potential danger to themselves or others. Allow due process so that no one's rights are trampled, but the ability to go to court, obtain an order, and then collect not only the firearms, but any weapons in the possession
Or
of that
might
individual.
take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system, because a lot of times by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures.
Just the way he says that, guys, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. And this is not about I hate one or the other. They're all ridiculous to me. That's ridiculous. And if we're not honest with that, he doesn't even the due process. Listen to the way he says it again.
By the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early.
Now, you realize that going to court is not where you get the due process. I mean, I guess in essence, you're talking about going and getting a warrant, for example, but the due process is something afforded to people who are going through that, not that they go to court. Like if you bring them to court and in the process, I mean, I'm making it more convoluted. The point is, the way he's saying that is clearly him kind of fumbling around the conversation. And he's simply saying, just take the guns first because court can take a while. Well, yeah, Trump, that's the whole point. Because the reality is you have to verify your claims, not just do what you want and then later drag out some process that you don't even care about because you already did what you wanted to do. And so let's be clear. Pence was starting with saying first, right? So he was highlighting what should be the case is we have an issue, which by the way, if you want to go real Second Amendment or actual shall not be infringed, which is where I'm at with all of it, then there is no sense in which they can ever do that, no matter what the argument. See, this is where we have to get back to. There is no fire in a theater. There is no, if it is shall not be infringed, that means there is no law that can be passed that can take it away from you. We have to be real about this. But overall, he's saying if there's somebody who's a danger to themselves, right, that we can say there's a danger there, then they have to prove it. They have to go to court, get the warrant, and then they go and get the gun. That's what Mike was saying. Trump just said, let's do it the other way around. And he goes on later to reiterate that in the same sentence and saying due process first, or rather guns first, due process later, or something like that. So here's the next one. This one's 2018. This one is 2025.
Been rewriting it, and we are going to bring in something called the gun violence restraining order. So if someone is civilly committed typically you can hold them for up to 72 hours, but
civilly committed. Do you realize how frivolous that is? Like, wellness check. I mean, they can do that if they choose to. So all they're really doing is setting up a reality where they can just argue based on superficial things that this is the case, and we'll do that just to be sure, just a 72-hour watch just to make sure. And then they can argue, take your guns away. Or they make it about cannabis consumption or any number of other things that shouldn't be illegal in the first place if we actually understand the Constitution. But that's what they're doing.
people are getting out within 24 hours, the majority of them. So what we want to do is let law enforcement come in and take the guns.
Good.
They are a danger to the...
Good, he says, good. Right. So come in, take the guns because we've decided you're dangerous. Now, even if you are dangerous, that shall not be infringed seems pretty clear to me. But I know, and this is what we should be fair about, right? There are people out there who argue even people that argue the Constitution is just invalid today. Look, I disagree strongly, but if you're going to make an argument, I say it every time, lay out your argument, make your case. Here's why, yes, I agree. It was nice to see somebody in the conversation today, one out of the 129 comments that I discussed with him, and he was willing to admit, yes, you're right, that's unconstitutional. But his argument was, I just disagree. I think mentally ill people shouldn't be able to. And I said, that's good. I disagree with you, but that's how that's argued. This is how the conversation should actually go. And so the reality is with what they're discussing is that ultimately, like I said, first, it shall not be infringed. But if you're going to argue that somebody who is mentally ill or, I guess whatever they're trying to say, there's some kind of a risk factor, then you make the argument that you believe the government should have the unilateral ability to jump in and take what's yours, regardless of the Constitution, because they decide you're dangerous. And it's because there's not a world in which they'll abuse that, right? There's not a history in which they've always done that, right? This is so simple. We break it down. And again, we don't even have to make it about all or nothing. Let's have a real conversation about, because look, I understand the logic. There are plenty of people out there that I would argue it's dangerous to allow to have a gun, but my principles are what I stand by. And I would say the principle is clear that everyone has that right. When they break the law with the gun, well, then they can be arrested for that. That's how everything is. They go, well, Ryan, a crime could be, yes, Crimes are committed every day by the government and people included. The idea that we start to get into the world in which we say, but a crime is about to, they could, they might, and the government goes, you're right, shut it all down, and we'll take every inch you give them. I mean, again, it's the logic to say that, yes, people could, why would we allow them in the first place? Because it's not your right to decide that for people. No matter what you think of how they look and act. It's just, this always comes back to the same conversation. So continuing here, yes, take the guns first is where they're going with this. All because they've decided based on whatever they've flimsy, setup they have that you are problematic. And we've already seen what they've done. People like Khalil, Ozturk, many, many immigrants that have been abused and forced out of the country who are here legally that had no criminal record because they had a traffic ticket from 20 years ago or because they said the wrong thing about Israel. And we don't believe they're going to apply it the same way. It's pretty obvious, guys. And look, the cannabis point shouldn't be skipped over. Trump's administration, like every other Republican administration, is seriously going after cannabis yet again. And now they're arguing this very same point. You realize how many Americans consume cannabis or any number of other things? And by the way, it was shockingly less dangerous than something like alcohol that most of the country consumes. But we're going to say that because you have a cannabis charge or caught, smoking, somehow you're not allowed to have a gun. They don't have that right. That's the understanding about this. The government are just people that are in place supposed to be representing Americans. They don't have the right to go no more Second Amendment. They just don't. God-given inherent rights. Let me play this again.
In something called the Gun Violence Restraining Order. So if someone is civilly committed typically you can hold them for up to 72 hours, but people are getting out within 24 hours, the majority of them. So what we want to do is let law enforcement come in and take the guns.
Good.
They're a danger to themselves.
Which you can't
or
do
others.
right now.
Well, because without being adjudicated. So because they're a danger to themselves.
You want them to take the guns and
when they are
not
committed.
go through 6 months of legal
trials.
Exactly.
Oh, you mean due process, Trump? Were you trying to avoid saying due process? Yes, you were.
But we also have to give the mentally ill the due process in which they deserve. President.
Okay, so let's just have a second to think about how clumsy she is compared to what Mike Pence was doing. Now, to be fair, not even to be accurate, Pence wasn't trying to make he was just simply stating what the bill would allow and saying due process and then take the guns, which Trump didn't like. So she just very clearly laid out the fact that we're taking the guns first, but we have to give them their due process. So she thinks by just saying that, it somehow changes the fact that you just literally outlined no due process. And if you do it after you take it, it's not due process. So just recognize how silly that is. Listen to that again. And Trump just wants he wants you to know we're taking the guns first. And she seems to be trying to kind of maneuver around it because apparently she's not dumb enough to not be able to recognize that that's wild, but not smart enough to be able to make an argument that can make it make sense.
So because they're a danger to themselves.
You want them
without being adjudicated. So because they're a danger to themselves.
You want them to take the guns and
when they are
not go through 6 months of legal trials.
So they can commit you for whatever they decide, and it may be even justifiable being committed for something. And then argue because of that, they can take your guns away. Well, this is what Second Amendment advocates, people that understand the Constitution, are up in arms about. And it gets way worse when you understand Derek's article that relates to the act and what they're doing within it. This is just on top of that point.
Exactly. But we also have to give the mentally ill the due process in which they deserve, President. So what we're doing is they're going to be able to take the guns when they're taken into custody.
So you're lying then. So that's not true.
Or into the hospital. And then when they're released within 24 hours or 72 hours later, typically it's 24 hours, but law enforcement will have 72 hours to determine whether they should give those guns back.
Oh, great. Okay, so we take the guns. And then we discuss amongst ourselves whether we think we should give them back to you. Anybody with a brain will understand how that will be abused. But apparently not people who want to support Trump, even though they pretend he's the one protecting your rights.
They can go to a judge and say, Your Honor, please keep these guns. We feel this person is still a danger to himself or others.
Right. Okay. So even the fact that you're talking about going to a judge to try to argue that we need to keep the guns already, like I would argue a judge worth their salt is going to say, well, you just violated his due process. You violated his rights. Clearly, because you've taken the guns already. But that aside, because most of these judges don't understand their positions today, is that what she's saying is go to the judge after the fact, so it's not due process. But do you believe that's actually going to happen? You see how this administration right now is continually ignoring whatever the judges, left or right, have to say if it challenges what they want. Both Bondi and a couple of others have point blank stated that they're not going to follow the orders. And so all this shows you is the ability, they get the justification out there to take them first. We'll deal with everything later. That's how these people operate. And I'm not even just talking about this administration. So this is just painful that we even have to have this conversation and debate with people out there who pretend to be patriots and, fighting for our rights, and then will completely back something like this or gaslight everyone to think it's fake. As this guy says, Tim, it's always the people with Patriot or 1776 in their name that deny it. Guess what? The founder would have stacked bodies a mile high by now. Or guess what? The founder would have stacked bodies, just simply saying that they're doing the wrong thing. Now here, Dan says, this is so important, and this is what point I was making before, the mainstream, if they really hated him, would be shouting this, right? I mean, this is huge to be like, look at, they would use this relentlessly to show the people that support him that he doesn't actually believe what he says he does. But they don't, because the government wants this, all sides of it. That's what I believe anyway. And then just a quick overlap. There's plenty of these, some of which I have, but the side note, if you try to search certain accounts on Twitter, I've said it before, it's so obviously manipulated. I can have tweets in front of me that literally say certain things, search for those exactly, and they won't pop up in a search, like the CIA post from Trump, where he said, get the CIA's help now. Interestingly relevant to CIA in Afghanistan. This is a point from 2024. Trump says, gun owners must register to vote today if you want to save your guns. Our Second Amendment's under siege by Democrats. They want to confiscate your guns. Well, yeah, I agree. I think the government does in general. But what you're doing seems to have been more in this direction than any other administration that I've seen. And Derek makes excellent articles in this. Gun rights groups have labeled legal arguments advanced by the Trump administration in an ongoing lawsuit as the, quote, most anti-Second Amendment ever filed by a Republican administration. The article is entitled, Guns Rights Groups Condemn Trump DOJ for Defending National Firearms Act, something that was roundly pushed back on, right? And so what happened is essentially is they removed a small part of it, a tax that was being applied. And even the NRA stood up and said, this is a big deal. Like, this is the most important move to remove these things. And then instead of getting rid of the act, which they were kind of signaling, they leaned into it and are trying to expand it. And so even everyone, NRA, Gun Owners of America, they stood up and said, whoa, like that the tax was good, but what they're doing now is worse than it was before. Now it says the plaintiffs argue in this case that when President Trump signed the Big Bill Act, whatever they call it, into law on July 4th, 2025, a bill that removed the NFA's transfer, that's the National Firearms Act of 1934, where was I? It says a bill that removed the $200 transfer tax and a manufacturing tax on silencers, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns. The tax's removal rendered the entire NFA, the act, unenforceable and effectively repealed it. So basically, when they removed the tax, people were like, okay, they're going to get rid of this. Trump is signaling that, and in removing the tax, it effectively made the bill void, but they didn't stop it. So everyone was going, this is just a middle stance. They're going to get rid of this altogether. The Gun Owners of America and GOF, which was the Gun Owners Foundation, are using the tax repeal as leverage to challenge the strike down of 1934 law altogether. 15 states, including Texas and Florida, have joined the lawsuit in support of the organization. So to be clear, most gun rights groups are pushing hard against removing the act entirely. So it says the Department of Justice has asked the court to grant a summary judgment and dismiss the lawsuit. So the DOJ is saying, dismiss what they're doing. Don't remove the act and dismiss this, asserting that the NFA is constitutional. But it's not. I mean, it's inherently not constitutional by every stretch of the imagination, and every one of these groups will tell you that. Anybody who reads the Constitution. But you say they're just trying to say that because they know the buzzwords will work with the blind followers that they need to follow them. And it says GOA has called the DOJ's filing the most anti-Second Amendment brief from a supposedly pro-gun DOJ. And there's a video here from Gun Owners of America. Unfortunately, Pam Bondi says defends the NFA and uses some of the worst of the gun control lobby's talking points. Well, I mean, guys, we need to stop. I mean, it's like every other point we could talk about. They'll say the one thing, and then Bondi comes out and goes, hate speech, censorship, and we don't see what's going on. This is a very clear sleight of hand that's, I think they failed at miserably. The DOJ treats Congress, this is from the Gun Owners of America, the DOJ treats Congress's removal of the historic $200 tax as a pretext to rewrite the limits of congressional power. Yeah, in every other context too, by the way, advancing an argument that would open the door to federal regulation far beyond anything the framers intended. GOA wrote in a response to the filing, they accused the Trump DOJ of doubling down on an archaic and unconstitutional law while attempting to expand federal power to historic levels. I mean, it's just such a crazy overlap. To not just be the opposite. It's not just, it's not that they're not fighting for your rights. They're going far the other direction. They're trying to destroy it right in front of you while claiming they're trying to defend you. This is kind of always what it's been doing, but this is just so in your face. And NRA, these different groups that are, that's why I use that picture today, who are backing him for the most part, are suddenly going, this is insane. This is our one issue, and you're clearly challenging this. But if you really look at everything else, from the Epstein files to mRNA shots to foreign policy to Zionism to technocracy to everything, globalism, they are sprinting in that direction while just yelling the opposite. But it's no different than what I've always said. Every aspect of our government throughout history has been doing terrible things and yelling freedom. And I guess it's working. I guess they've just taken it to an extreme degree. But I mean, I shouldn't say that. I think most Americans are seeing through it right now, but it's still happening. It says the GOA warns that if the court accepts what the DOJ is pushing right now, Congress and federal agencies could regulate or even ban common firearms and accessories. That's what the gun rights groups are saying about Trump's administration's actions. That they could end up banning from this exact thing they're setting up everything. Accessories, common firearms. Quote, if courts accept the government's argument, Congress could claim the power to regulate virtually anything, including firearms, on the thinnest of statutory pretext. Okay, so let's just say Trump has no intention of doing that. What happens when AOC gets elected, guys? God forbid. You think that you're going to hand them abilities to just go, we're going to regulate all these out of existence like they've been saying they want to do forever? That's probably what's going to happen, because then the Republicans could go, look at what the Democrats did, even though they laid it up for them. And then it will give them the teeter-totter. Will they come back into power after this? It goes on and on. The people in power are demonized. The other side's the one fighting the deep state. And then it just circles around as they keep high-fiving each other behind the backs. So that's not conservative jurisprudence, it writes. This is authoritarianism cloaked in legalese. Yes, make no mistake. This reads exactly like something the Biden administration would have produced. The vice president of Gun Owners of America explained. Unfortunately, nobody who needs to hear this is going to see it because Twitter is probably suppressing this into all hell and WordPress and everything else. But nonetheless, get it out there, talk to people. It's just so shockingly clear what's actually happening. Under the history of anti-Second Amendment sentiment, despite the expressions of surprise and disappointment over the Trump administration's actions, Donald Trump has never been a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, despite all the screeching you're going to hear from that statement. During his first administration, this is something that Brian from High Impact Flicks has been saying forever, and he's right. During his first administration, Trump supported calls for controversial red flag laws, government-approved removal of weapons based on spurious claims, and a bump stock ban of firearms. He's the one that rolled that out, a ban on bump stocks, as well as the fact, the red flag laws, the bump stocks, as well as the fact of the two different clips. It says, in February 2018, while discussing school safety, Trump infamously said, a lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes too long to go to court to get the due process procedures. Take the guns first, go to due process second. He reiterated the same in 2025. In reality, Donald Trump is just, as Derek writes, just another government hypocrite who says what the people want to hear so he can get elected, then does whatever he and his technocrat friends want once in office. It's amazing to see the kind of people that would disregard what this is. And then they go, but mental illness. It's like, okay, well, that's not an invalid point, but it's still unconstitutional. The patriots out there telling you that it's weird, the contradictions you're seeing today. I mean, I really hope it just starts to show you what's really going on. Fox News comes out 16 hours ago and says, Supreme Court case could restore gun rights for millions in blue states. AG Bondi, the one who's currently being called out by every gun. It's kind of like all these groups, joining in to commit genocide, and every single human rights group in the world is like genocide. They're like, you're Hamas. So right now you've got the majority of the most prominent gun groups going, you're anti-Second Amendment. And she's in here going, I'm fighting for your Second Amendment rights. It's just kind of sad. I mean, guess what else they're going to do? They're going to keep trying to lie as loud as they can. Doggy Style simply says, you need to stop lying, and post the clip that we put out. Now, here is the long thread of Trump before the election telling you how much he was going to fight for Israel and how much he was going to suppress American rights for Israel over and over and over and over and over. I went over this 1,000 times. But at the end, I also added on 2 other clips. that just seem highly relevant to this conversation. Just understand that it's not just about guns, it's about whatever he wants to do. And he is not what he pretends he is. If you read his books, if you look at his actions, look at what he's done, not what he says, for any president, by the way, or any politician, and you'll quickly recognize that he is not what he pretends to be. Neither is Biden or any of the rest of them, guys. But the reality is this is the one currently tricking so many people. Here's what he said about the internet, saying you're stupid for saying this is unconstitutional, even though it literally is.
Because we're losing a lot of people because of the internet. And we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people.
Yeah, Bill Gates.
That really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people.
Right. Even though it is unconstitutional, literally. So you're foolish for understanding the Constitution, unlike Trump, apparently. I mean, there's just no misunderstanding that. And it's not even just the fact that, let's just say he was wrong. It's the way that he discusses it. Ooh, freedom of speech. Guys, that's insulting. He's literally speaking to people who care about the Constitution like they're children. And that's supposed to be the patriot bait. I mean, come on, guys. Here's the one about the flag. Now, again, it's not about whether you think this should or should not be the case. It is the case. Now, if you want to make an argument for why this should change, then make your case. But the reality is burning a flag has been roundly protected. Ron Paul and plenty of others have stood by that forever. The Supreme Court has roundly upheld that. And now he did the same thing. Of course, the last action he did, it was sort of a step around, acting like it's about burning ordnance in public. And then Trump was like, it's about flags. It was very clear about that. So he is every which way ignoring the Constitution.
Took the American flag down. They were writing Hamas on the bell outside of Union Station. What does a Donald Trump do if he takes office to these people on the street?
Rarely have we seen anything like this, and I think you should get a 1-year jail sentence if you do anything to desecrate the American flag. Now, people will say, oh, it's unconstitutional. Those are stupid people. Those are stupid people that say that. We have to work in Congress to...
Apparently, you're stupid for knowing that's unconstitutional, right? Because it is, literally. Now, Decentralized News has a great clip going back to all the overlaps, how clearly, Ron Paul makes the case a long time ago about using the word desecrated. It's not a religious symbol, guys. What they're doing is clear. This is jingoism. I can have respect for the flag for many reasons, but I'm not going to act like it is an end-all, be-all representation of everything that is America. It's not. You can make a lot of examples. At the end of the day, it's largely because of what our government has turned it into. But I still understand the reality of the premise, the original point. But the point is not about whether I think it is something you should respect. In many ways, I do. It's about whether or not it's constitutional. And see, they're making it about emotion. They're making it about the idea that it's important to us and we can't allow that. Well, then all you're saying is because of my feelings, the Constitution doesn't matter in this case. Like every other one he's doing. You'd think that people that call themselves patriots would be the ones calling this out first. Now, overlapping this with an interesting point on free speech, Benoit points this out. Over a month in a Tennessee jail for a meme. Bushart, a 61-year-old former law enforcement officer, has posted numerous memes on Facebook making light of the killing of Charlie Kirk. The one that got Bushart arrested was a meme featuring President Donald Trump with the words, "We have to get over it." What it was is a quote from Donald Trump where he said, "We have to get over it," after the school shooting in Perry High School in Iowa. So clearly making a point. Why would that one be acceptable to say get over it? Well, you can't with Charlie Kirk. Well, the reality is, regardless of what you think about him, that's free speech, guys. You can say what you want. You can think what you want, whether it's insulting or not. Didn't we all make fun of that during the left's? It's just clearly, guys, you are snowflakes, broflakes. You're all doing the same thing. This is crazy to me because what we're watching is the same kind of conversation. This is wildly unconstitutional. We have Pam Bondi coming out and going hate speech, censorship, and using Charlie Kirk's name, even though he was adamant about the opposite. These people are, it's just everything about it is in your face, showing you that they're making fun of you. But here's another example of this. All right, this was, hold on, this is right here. Shoot, where was that? How did I lose that? That's frustrating. Well, I had a post that was, no, it's not going to work. Dang. It was Elon Musk. That's frustrating. Where did I put that? Oh, well, I'm just going to move past it. But just to make a point, that's frustrating. I had Elon Musk simply saying, somebody was arrested in the UK. Oh, you know what? I think I've got the video, even though I must have closed that on accident. Yeah, it's right here. That's frustrating. Making sure I didn't move it somewhere weird. Okay, I'll play this clip right here. So the point is, before we get to this stuff, the felony charge for the meme, right? And that's crazy, guys. Everyone should be up in arms about that. That's wild, right? Okay, then explain to me why Elon Musk and everybody else is not screaming about this while they're making the same case continually about what's going on in Europe. Both things matter, right? It's obviously the same thing, but it's funny how this gets
in places that don't have free speech,
yes.
Right? Like England,
where they lock people up for memes and stuff. Literally. Yeah.
12,000 people this year.
Yeah, which is crazy, right? And yes, there's a lot that focal point is outrageous in Europe. But if we don't recognize the same underhanded things happening all over the place in this country and just recognizing that it's even happening at all, these people are hypocrites. They don't really care about what they're just trying to project outwardly and while we're being manipulated in this country. So just recognize this is happening too, but it's only specific in regard to the partisan angle. Now, on that point of other constitutional rights, I just want to overlap this quickly with the discussion of immigration. Trump, this is December 1st, 2025. Trump says he would, quote, absolutely revoke citizenship from naturalized criminals. Well, guess what, guys? That's unconstitutional outside of very specific cases. And this has to do with, we went over this in previous shows. The idea that what they're simply saying, like, let's just say a person who's naturalized breaks the law. You don't get it's not even on the table that you can just revoke their citizenship. Because once you're a U.S. citizen, you have constitutional rights. There's very slim things, and I believe it has to do with, I think, like there's specific foreign policy overlaps. I forget what the two things were, but they argue that they can be removed if you're naturalized. What Trump is talking about is talking about Israel, saying free Palestine, discussing things that they disagree with, revoking. I mean, look at what they did to Khalil. They tried to do it to Ozturk. These people didn't even break the law. So what he's doing right here is absolutely unconstitutional. They're talking about reevaluating all of these people that are currently here. And on top of that, let's not forget that they've also floated the point for Americans, which is the same conversation. So, I mean, it's a very, very tiny nuance to argue naturalized versus born here. But the reality is it's the same principle. And if they're going to start arguing that they can undermine the Constitution for this, they can do it to anything. This is the boiling frog happening in front of you. It's just obvious where this goes, guys. So you remove this point because this is what people try to pretend somehow means something wrong. They're simply going, Trump says he would revoke citizenship from Americans. That's the same sentence. Whether or not they were naturalized, these are American citizens. It's just over the top, guys, and it's going to continue. Americans speaking out about Israel's genocide could be next. In principle, it's the same thing. Show from 2025. This one was from October 31st, 2025. It's Derek's. Oh, excuse me. This is my show about this. DHS lies about detaining and deporting U.S. citizens. If they can't even be honest about how many they've clearly been detaining, like you just all over the place. And I did a whole focus on this. This show will blow your mind if you haven't seen it. Opening fire on cars full of families and then getting caught lying about why they did it, making up entire stories about being rammed with a car after they shot a woman 5 times. And then it later turned out that she didn't do anything they said. I mean, these are horrifying situations, not only unconstitutional, but like dystopian style. We are drifting madly right now. And of course, hey, look, Trump ready to attack Venezuela. It does seem where it's going. But also U.S. citizens being deported. This has happened, guys, and people are ignoring it. On top of that, how ICE is becoming the secret police force under Trump. Yeah, a lot of us said exactly where this was going. If you have larger budgets than most countries for ICE, pretty sure you know where that's going to go if you're not blinding yourself. It's all in front of you. Now, the point of where it's going and who's been arrested, and then we're going to get into Prospera and Honduras and Venezuela, is that reality is, guys, they haven't followed up on any of this stuff. I mean, look at the list that's outlined here. It's a meme. Russia collusion. Let's think of all the claims they've made. And I would agree with most of it, at the very least, of the kind of things that were done. No one's been arrested for it. January 6th. Why isn't Pelosi in jail? Why isn't tons of people? Not a single person. Mar-a-Lago raid? Didn't Trump get raided illegally and he made it a big deal? They broke the law. Where are the people in jail? Donald Trump, Biden auto pen. He literally just floated the idea that he was going to invalidate every single one, despite the fact that no one's been able to prove that somebody else did it. Remember, the auto pen has been upheld by the Supreme Court more than once. But all that means is the president using it to expedite the stamping of it or whatever. So if you can prove that somebody else did it, because Trump has used the auto pen numerous times, that's provable. If you can prove that Biden was letting somebody else do it, which wouldn't surprise me, then make a case about it. But they're not doing that. They're just trying to muddy the waters and flood the zone with enough nonsense that is never going to resolve. Half the cases the FBI is involved with right now seem to be designed to never really resolve, to make you think that everything's happening. But the auto pen is only, and what the argument somebody made is if Trump can invalidate all this right now, well, guess what, guys? If you're pardoned for January 6th or anything else, the next administration is going to wipe it all out. 2020 election. Seriously? Not a single person? Not one? That's the entire focus. Epstein files, COVID, Benghazi, Doge findings, Ukraine impeachment. You could go on forever. Not a single one. I mean, like, of the conversations they've been having, you can argue arrests have been made of individual random lackeys out there, but not in earnest. Nothing that truly seems to matter at the operational level. So this is what you get from a lot of, and I find this hilarious, seeing as how it got community noted. Let's see if it changed. No, it says the same. So this person said, I trust President Trump more than any poll. I already pointed this the other day. I trust Trump more than the media, more than anybody else in DC, more than anyone in Hollywood, more than anyone, any influencer. And he goes, this is called patriotism. And he got fact checked, and it says this post describes allegiance to a person. Patriotism is an allegiance to a country. Patriotism means, and this is crazy, they cite even Roosevelt to a variation on what I've pointed out before, where he says, patriotism means to stand by the country. It does not mean to stand by the president. What he actually says in a different quote is that it's servile and morally treasonable to the American people to stand by the president, right or wrong. And that's a Republican. But I think I just simply said the community note's hilarious. That it even needs to be put there says quite a bit about where we are right now. But this is what they're trying to push. Patriotism is blind support for Trump? Well, apparently that's what they're thinking about. Now, here's a clip that was put out by Red Pill Bot. It says, and this is Alex Jones, Jack Posobiec, and Tucker Carlson on stage. And it says, Alex Jones on stage in front of a massive crowd talking about sending globalists to prison. Remember that? Obama, Soros, BlackRock, right? Literally, except Obama, literally tied into the administration, including Soros through Bissett, right? BlackRock, Larry Fink, literally on the inside, guys. And he go, and the New World Order, and they all thunderously cheered. Yeah, remember that? As David Icke says, this doesn't age well. Some of us were pointing out at the time that Trump was part of the globalist deep state and getting, in quotes, obviously, in regard to deep state, whatever you want to call it, and getting untold abuse for it. You can tell people what they want to hear to milk the applause, like they're doing in this clip. It seems like some kind of rah-rah football thing. And it says, or you can calmly tell them the truth and take the SHIT. But the choice is still a no contest. Again, I would argue I agree with him for people that have principles and integrity, honor. The man who is always against war, by the way, supports regime change in Venezuela. That's Alex Jones. And always against war is in quotes. And it says, quote, it's okay when we do it, right? Alternative media, in quotes, a joke. It's just, guys, it's not about us, anybody who is actually being objective about this. This is so consistent. It's insane to me. But watch the clip. I'm sure it'll stand out. I'm only going to play a quick part of it.
There's nothing to be ashamed of there. I'm not ashamed, and you shouldn't be either. They should be ashamed. He called 9/11, and they tried to put him in jail for it. So anyway. Oh,
yeah. Is that what happened? Or that's a complete fabrication, grifting off the back of shoot. I can't let him forget his name. So I always forget I mix the two names up. Now I'm forgetting it. Hold on. Wow, this will pop up, I'm thinking. Hold on. That's really frustrating to me. Seeing if something pops up in the search. Bill Cooper, thank you. See, I love this chat. You guys are on it. Yeah, it's just frustrating why I couldn't remember his name. Now, the reason I wanted to make sure is I always mix up his last name with somebody else who just confuses the issue. But Bill Cooper. I mean, really think about this, guys. This is easily verifiable. Bill Cooper is the one who had the radio station who literally called 9/11. You could prove it. You could look it up. And then Alex Jones tries to kind of emulate and grift on top of that. And then Bill Cooper goes, this guy's a hack. This guy's a complete manipulator. This guy is a deceiver. This guy, I could play the clips. I might as well. I think I've got them right here. And so it's fascinating to me to watch this play out. Let me check and see if I've got it. I guess not. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Here's one of them.
Alex Jones, you are a bold-faced, miserable, stinking little coward liar. Now let me say that again so there's no mistake about it. You can all tell Alex Jones that I said this, and I suspect he's listening because he does. Alex Jones, you are a bold-faced, stinking, rotten little coward liar. I was only on the Alex Jones show one time. It was years ago when I didn't know who he was, when I didn't realize what a liar and a coward and a sensationalist bullshit artist that he is. He was on one little FM station down in Texas. He wasn't on all the stuff that he's on now. And I agreed to be on his broadcast. That's when I was doing guest appearances on broadcasts, years ago. I was not cut off. I did not use any kind of foul language whatsoever. He treated me very well, and I stayed on for the whole show. Some of you in Texas know that that's true because you heard the broadcast and you taped it. Later, when I found out who Alex Jones was and what he was doing to the truth, and what a cowardly liar and sensationalist he really is, every time he called me after that, I have always refused to appear on his broadcast. Absolutely refused to lend him any credibility whatsoever by appearing on his broadcast. And that made him very angry. I've also revealed him for the lying sensationalist bullshit artist that he is by every once in a while bringing to your attention the lies and the deceit and the rumors that he spreads over the airwaves that are not good for any of us, and they're not good for the nation. They are especially not good for militia and patriots.
That's a real message we need to tell. I wasn't going to stop it, but that's such an important message right there. As we're watching the Patriots take over, I mean, this is what he's turned this into. I'll let it play out just since we're doing this. I've done the clip after this. But the point, guys, is just that very clearly Bill Cooper was the one who was rightly doing this. And Jones is basically just kind of like taken over his background, like some of the claims. And this is what the reality was, that this is something he was grifting on. He's been called out by basically everyone who's ever left his group. I'll make that point in a second. And what he's doing right here is manipulation. And what I'm trying to get to is the larger point about the two-party illusion. This just makes it very clear about how we're arguing. Everyone's going to go to jail, and they're keeping you trapped in this thing while they've been calling out all these big situations. And now when things are happening in earnest, they can't stop pointing anywhere else. And they're leaning in to the administration who's literally rolling it out in front of you.
Disgusting broadcast he ever did was on New Year's Eve, the year 2000, the New Year's Eve, 1999, bringing in the year 2000, which he went completely out of his mind and claimed that Russia had launched intercontinental ballistic missiles with multiple warheads at the United States of America and actually panicked millions of people who were putting their children and their belongings in their cars and heading for the hills.
Yeah, doesn't that seem familiar? Like, I have somebody close to me, my family, who every time Jones screams about World War III with Russia because Putin said we have responses and we can use them if you do something, which they say every single day, everyone goes, oh my God, World War III is going to happen, which is it's not possible. In fact, it's like I've said, we're closer than we have been in a long time. But it's almost more dishonest to keep playing that card because of benign things this is kind of my point. As these things actually start to get close, he's pointing in the opposite direction. It just shows you how long this game has been played. Or Tim Pool in Civil War, or Laura Loomer in 9/11. They all have their they just keep screaming the same thing. You seen a common thread here?
Now, there's lots of things that can be said about me. Nobody needs to lie about me. Sometimes I am irritating. Sometimes I absolutely will not suffer fools and am just as rude as I can be. Nobody has to lie about me, Alex Jones. So I suggest that the next time somebody calls your broadcast and asks them about me, you tell the truth. There's lots of truth that you can tell about me. But don't ever lie on me, buddy, because I'll chop you off at your ankles. I will chew you up. I will spit you out for the lying, stinking, rotten little coward that you are. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say about Mr. Sensationalist, lying, rumor-mongering, bullshit artist, Alex Jones.
Well, I'll play this clip as well. This is, where was that? There we go. This is a clip from Slow News Day, and T's just kind of commenting on some of the others, and we have some to add after.
I am going to share a community story from our friend Richard Grove when he was at the InfoWars studio behind the scenes because of his documentary that he just filmed making State of Mind. And the commentary that he gave, observing that studio firsthand, was that they don't check their facts. They basically just run with it, and they do it way too fast. It's the same reason that, like, David Knight left the organization because he's like,
and Steve goes on to make the point that it's all the same with True Street Media and, you know, and Jason Berman, like a whole bunch of them, right? And so now we can add to that Greg Reese, David Knight, like you mentioned, Owen Schroyer, you know, and Owen Schroyer hasn't been as, you know, over the top about it, but what he said when he left was pretty much the same kind of thing. So the reason this is important to show is because this person is more influential than most of the corporate media, if not all of them right now. More, whether that's organic or not, it's still being projected that way. And they are exactly what Bill Cooper's telling you, are literally co-opting and driving the patriots, the militia movement, whatever you want to call it, the people who actually want to believe or do believe in the Constitution, and driving them into statism, driving them into actions that quite literally contradict what they believe in. It's confounding. So here, just to reiterate that same point, is what he was recently saying. Again, just to kind of bring this together with where we are today, doing the same old thing. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me go back to this before we get to that.
Thank you. Be either. They should be ashamed. He called 9/11 and they tried to put him in jail for it. So, and
the point again, he didn't, right? That's Bill Cooper.
Anyway, thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I got to say.
And this is pre-Ozempic, by the way.
I love you. This is a beautiful state full of beautiful people. And when we get President Trump elected, all of us together are going to lift the curse off of this country, and we're going to send the globalists to prison.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. It is amazing to meet all these great people, and whether they're black, white, old, young, to see the electricity in people's eyes that are populist and that are Americans and that love.
Yeah. Rah, rah, we're together. We're fighting for freedom and liberty. And then the exact opposite. And I support Venezuelan war. And I think we should remove your rights for X, Y, and Z. It's just, this is somebody, I don't know, who knows whether he believes it or not. Maybe he just rationalizes whatever he's told for people who want to support, or he's deliberately deceiving you. The point is, how many times can you push this narrative and then completely just argue the opposite? And you literally pick the conversation. And so in this case, back to this, we have this, globalists. Is that the case, Jones? Globalists are going to go to jail? Okay, well, we're talking about the same people, right? Here's the clip again where he made the case that this was coming. This was back on August 23rd.
All right. I have been talking to a lot of high-level DOJ sources. I'll leave it at that. I had a long conversation with one today. And I was actually authorized to tell you basically everything they told me, except a few things. But you know what? With the notes I wrote, I'm going to think about this and before I start putting it out.
Who wants to bet there was literally no calls at all?
Because this is big, big, big information. And folks know about me and InfoWars. I don't tell you I got something big unless I got something very, very big.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I disagree with that entirely. But if you want to check out the follow-up, right, what actually happened? Well, Comey was arrested, but then released because it was designed to fail, exactly like I told you, which anybody who looked through it could have seen for themselves, which is why the past prosecutor resigned, or rather got fired, because they refused to do it because they didn't want to look stupid. And the next person in line's like, I'll do it. Give me power. Let me look like I'm in power. I'll get to Cash Patel in a second. Which is what they're all seemingly doing, rushing in to be like, I'll do it because nobody else wants to look stupid, but I will if you give me a modicum of power, and then we can make fun of you. But clearly, that's not what's actually happened, right? And I followed up with this today and I said, where are we at on these big actions coming? Are they coming? Or were those actions just when he sold out to Israel 15 different ways? Here is the one I did before when I reiterated on 29th, but just here's Decentered News simply pointing out, he said the same about Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Fauci, Hillary. You can keep just listing off all these people. Most of them are literally on Trump's side right now, which is interesting, isn't it? Well, we're going to get the globalists, right? Well, breaking news, jumping into another story. President Trump has invited Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House for the 5th time in 10 months. I guess this is what, since we're talking about this, here's another one to bring up. I think this is the one. Let's see. Nope, not that one. This one is the conversation about Netanyahu. Should have remembered to bribe this in the first place. Well, it says Alex Jones' prediction that President Trump would completely cut ties with Benjamin Netanyahu comes true. And this is his video doing a victory lap. In this important report, Jones exclusively reveals the backstory of what turned Trump against Netanyahu and why this development is so important for world peace. Okay. Or not. Or it was not actually what happened at all, and you were saying that for whatever other reason, or because some CIA agent told you to say that, or whatever it is, and you trust. Okay, 10th time coming to the White House. And that's not counting the times they went to see him in Israel. Trump has invited Netanyahu to the White House roughly every 2 months since his inauguration. Guys, come on. We can't be this easy. Of course, this person gets it. I mean, that's exactly what this is. That's just perfect. That embodies exactly what this is. Now, that's not my opinion. That's not people who believe making America great against the agenda. That's the people who think MAGA means whatever Trump does. And this is obvious. A little heavy on the tan that day, it looks like. But reality is, guys, these are the Netanyahu is the most obvious example of the problem we're discussing. Zionist, globalist, technocratic, it all is coming together with these people. And they're trying to tell you to support it. Or you got people like this, including Eric Dowder, he shared it from, who are just all ridiculous. Here's Luke Rudowski saying, President Trump predicts we could see income tax completely eliminated. Stop teasing me. Do it. Right. That's what we're talking about. Trump floating an idea that will likely never come to pass because he wants you to not talk about the other thing. Good journalism. Keep it up. Here's what Trump said.
2, 3, 4 years, those numbers are going to go up. And I believe that at some point in the not too distant future, you won't even have income tax to pay because the.
So first of all, it's a completely maybe let's just kind of hope for that. That's what we talk about. I mean, that's just sad, guys. Clearly, there are people who want you to believe in everything they're floating. And how many things, look, the majority of things they've said have not come to pass. Most of them have gone the other direction.
Money we're taking in is so great, it's so enormous that you're not going to have income tax to pay.
Okay, just so we're understanding this. The situation that we all know is not actually happening, that your costs are actually going up and every rent's going up. And, the claim is that because we're just rolling in money from the tariffs, that maybe we'll just have no income tax in the future. It just, the kind of people that are falling for these things are either have no clue about anything other than what's right in front of them. I mean, don't understand politics, don't understand finance. I mean, I'm not a financial expert, but the idea of what he's saying, look, if it comes to pass and there's some, if he works this out to benefit, that's fantastic. And I will praise that. And I'll happily say, I made a mistake and I misread. But do we really think that's going to happen? And the Fed and the IRS, all the claims they've made. And it's justified by the fact that he's saying because of my practice, my tariff policy that's actually hurt your life right now is why it's all going to come back around. And of course, the reality seems to be a longer plan of transitioning into a new sort of federal control, basically that you just have to pay into everything they're doing. With your no CEO run country or, whatever it is they're doing, guys, that's where this seems to be going.
You get rid of it or just so great, it's so enormous that you're not going to have income tax to pay. Whether you get rid of it or just keep it around for fun or have it really low.
Yeah, why not? Maybe we'll just keep income tax for fun. Is this guy so shockingly out of touch with what Americans are actually dealing with? Yes.
Much lower than it is now. But you won't be paying income tax. We've slashed $1 trillion in costly job-killing regulations, saving America.
Yeah, to billionaires. Do you really think that cutting regulations to billionaire companies that are doing things that hurt your life is in your interest? Do you think he's cutting regulations that make the average construction worker able to work? No, guys. What they're doing is they're allowing businesses to dump in your water. They're allowing them to not do the proper trials. That's what the kind of regulations are that they're removing. Now, that's not everything. There's a whole conversation to be had about different examples, but what we're overall seeing is the very regulations that are in place that ultimately stop the evil people from abusing their power. Now, my opinion as always is that we should be in a place where there is no government at all. And that ultimately this is not, that all of this wouldn't be the case if we lived in that kind of world. I would like to argue. My point though is that as we're here, and I would like to see none of that, the last place we should start are the regulations that hold back the powerful and the villainous companies that would happily dump their sewage in your water. It's just, again, all these things are so frustratingly obvious to me. I just hope that people can start to see it. Now, when you have people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and all the rest of these feckless, inept people in these positions, because likely nobody with the actual skills wants to be taken advantage of and made to look stupid and called names for doing the right thing because Trump didn't like it, they don't do it. So the next person in line will rush into place because they're desperate for power. That's what I think we're watching. Now, this article simply highlights what I've been saying right in the beginning. I mean, if you look back at the coverage, again, it's a small point, but I was of the mind, it was my opinion, that Kash Patel was very out of his depth. That was long before that was a talking point. And it was because I thought it was clear that's the way he was acting. And I think it's become kind of an ongoing trend now. But then Trump came in and said, I back him, he's doing great. And it, kind of tapered away again. But now this came out in the last couple of days, or I think the last 24 hours. I think this nails it. And now, because of this, I'm willing to bet you, my opinion, but I'm predicting that it will likely go where he gets fired. I don't know how you hide what this is. Now, triggered Keystone Cash lashes out at Dem mocking his FBI cosplay. So it says FBI Director Kash Patel lost it on a Democratic lawmaker who teased him over a leaked report that said some of his own agents view him as in over his head and insecure. That's what, this does not appear to even be like a weaponized thing. This appears to be a report from within the agency about how this is just the issues that they have with what's going on. And then that was ultimately then weaponized by maybe a Democratic lawmaker. But the report itself is we'll get into it. And also, I think it's pretty self-evident that that's what we're dealing with right now. And they also have the same thoughts about Dan Bongino. It says Patel, 45, appears to have unraveled after this 115-page pulse check was released, containing embarrassing details from 24 current and former FBI sources who described his first 6 months in the role as dismal and warned that the Bureau was all effed up. And this is where it gets insane, guys. I mean, not insane, but just embarrassing. And it exactly encapsulates what I think this person is. The report also detailed an incident in which Patel is said to have refused to get off a plane in Utah until he was provided with an FBI raid jacket. Agents who were in the middle of the Charlie Kirk murder investigation. This seems to be an additional example to the other ways he slowed everything down to get what he wanted. Agents who were in the middle of investigating Charlie Kirk's murder were forced to find him a proper jacket, ultimately being forced to provide him with a woman's medium size because nothing else would fit. And they had to then dress it up with patches that he requested before he would let them go back to work. So they had to scrounge up a jacket for him off a plane, which who knows if that was even easy to, or grab patches to put on it to make himself look like, and that's what this is. That's these flimsy little fake FBI patches they stuck on this jacket because he demanded to look like he was real. What else do you call that besides cosplay? Anybody who was secure in their position would not need to dress up, walk out in your suit or whatever you were wearing and be like, if you're comfortable, this is insecurity. And look, he has every right to be insecure. He's out of his depth. I get it. But it's important to understand these are the kind of people that are there because they are easily maneuverable. They can be manipulated. They'll do whatever they're told. Patel has been roundly ridiculed over the report, including by Democratic Representative Eric Stalwell, also 45, who posted something on Twitter. I don't mind that FBI Director Kash Patel had to wear a woman's size to cosplay as someone in charge. Good. That's a good hit right there. I just wish he'd focus on stopping the rampant domestic terrorism happening on his watch. See how interesting this is? So the point about Kash Patel being out of his depth and cosplaying, I think, is more important, or an important point, rather. I think something James Lee did pointed out about Hegseth. I'm getting more and more the sense that a lot of this administration are window dressing, just a gut feeling. and that whoever's behind them, whether it's technocrats or Zionists or all of the above, are actually the ones dictating what's happening. Whether that's literally someone behind them, like a, Gleason, Elon Musk kind of a thing, or ultimately somebody just guiding direction. I think we can see that. But then he says, I just wish you'd focused on all the domestic terrorism. Yes, I mean, it's just obviously all going in the same direction. Both sides of the paradigm think you guys are terrorists, whether left or right. They're looking at different pieces of it, but they think Americans are the focal point. We've been telling you that for a long time. But it continues. He said domestic terror arrests were, quote, up 30% this year. Well, gee, I wonder why. Because you're just scooping up anybody and claiming they're all terrorists, which seems to be the case. Not a single follow-up, whether it Dallas or the October 31st terror attack, because they used the word pumpkin. Show me the outcome. I'm not saying, it's not like, well, there's in the process. Look at what's going on. It seems to have basically stalled out. Now, I believe it will go somewhere, but you can look at these cases and realize how flimsy these things are. Or talking about immigration or ICE roundup. They're using these numbers like all the rest of them to claim we're shockingly up 30% this year. I don't believe it. And how much you want to bet when we go to the end of this, we'll be able to verify that it didn't even actually happen. Now it says, claiming that achievement was impressive, he says, considering I spent 0 days dating a Chinese spy named Fang Fang. Typical, partisan, childish. I mean, it's what we've seen from them in front of Congress. They've always deflected. All of them hit politicians will always do this, but they do it like this in clumsy ways. Sort of like that new Valentina politician. Somebody asked her, how are you enjoying the AIPAC money? And she was like, your mom or something. That's the best they can do. And all these Republicans are like, yeah, it's childish. So in this case, his point was first impressive. So way to pat yourself on the back for something that I bet you is not even happening. But then talking about an example, which there's valid consideration to have about the case about his dating a Chinese spy or being connected with it, which ultimately didn't go anywhere. But I believe that's because whatever these government agents are doing, they're ultimately largely supported by the larger government agenda. But all he did was basically go, what about your thing? Right? Like, instead of just acknowledging you're the thing with China stuff, it's just clumsy. And all it shows is you trying to shuck the thing over to something else. And it goes, where should I send your woman's medium for date night? Really? You just say the same thing back? I mean, you can sit back and think. You write a tweet. You could be like, let me take my time and make this intelligent. But you are. I know you are, but what am I? That's basically what he did. Publicly revealed in 2020 that she was suspected Chinese spy was the case with Solwart. That ultimately there was a person that was connected to him through funding and election campaigns that was revealed that she's a suspected Chinese spy. Now, it wouldn't surprise me at all. To me, this is not the relevant point of this conversation. All these people are potentially compromised by Israel, China, whatever else. We should question all of them. I think our government's been sold out to the highest bidder for a long time. The FBI assessment that got Patel hot under the collar also slams Deputy Director Dan Bongino as something of a clown and says the pair are too fixated on social media. Yes, guys, this is exactly what everyone can see. If he's posting Fox News articles to make his reports about the FBI, they're not in charge. I don't know how else to tell you that. And it says the document's authors have said they never intended to attack the FBI leadership, but that the feedback they received from the inside the agency ended up being mostly negative. Now, whether that was deliberately put out to make them look bad, which wouldn't surprise me, it doesn't change that these things are being stated from people with inside the agency. The assessment was handed to New York Post columnist, a choice some viewed as designed to inflate maximum damage, most likely. That's what they do. It's politics. Bongino appeared to allude to the leak on Twitter, doing the last thing they always do. The opponents will do anything to undo the great things we're doing. The FBI reforms. Well, that has nothing to do with whether or not you're failing at reforming. These are what people think about what you're doing. Is that what the Democrats did? No, that's what people in your Republican FBI are saying about you. But what else are they going to do? They have to try to deflect. Like I said, I think these people are going to, in some way or another, get thrown under the bus. Now, lastly, it's just funny to me that this clip, I mean, I'll just play for you. This just makes me laugh. We could all use a good laugh here and again. And this is what I said when I posted this. Because I think this is what I mean when I say worthy of ridicule. I think these people who are right now doing things that are constantly destroying this country and undermining our rights don't deserve respect. You earn respect. So in this case, when we're talking about this situation he went through. People like this, it's not like they're just an innocent person who did a dumb thing. I don't think that's, making fun of somebody because they just look embarrassing. You can laugh at it, but it seems petty, right? But if you're talking about a government agent that's literally dictating negative things for your life, I think it's worthy of ridicule. That's what my point is, rather. So I simply said, we all need to laugh now and again. And since Cash is in the news today for yet another example of ineptitude and insecurity, I thought I'd share this gem with the video included. Maybe he was brought on board in order to be the scapegoat. If so, I doubt he would know that. Now, this is just hilarious to me. This was Fox News, who literally put him in a chair that was obviously higher than the interviewer's chair. And he sat there kicking his feet like a 6-year-old. I just don't know why you wouldn't notice that. I would walk in and instantly be like, are you kidding me? I'm not sitting in a high chair when you're sitting in a regular chair. Give me a better chair. But I guess he was just too insecure to say anything. I don't know. This just makes me laugh.
You guys see this Fox News interview with Cash Patel in the chair that they put him in? His fucking feet are dangling. I'm fucking short. This is hilarious. I tried to search to see if this was doctored in any way because of how comical it fucking looks, but it appears that this is the real photo. Can someone verify this? Because I thought Cash Patel was like 5'9". They did him fucking dirty with this chair.
Oh, sorry, damn it. Sorry, I got up for a second to grab something. I forgot there was cussing. My apologies for that. But that it just cracks me up because it is real, obviously. And if you look at the clip, you can clearly see that what they did was scoot the one chair back for perspective that makes it look like they're But if you look at the bottom, you can tell it's just scooted back and higher, and it just looks silly. Well, not an important point. I just think it's interesting to see where all this goes. And I do think that they get the sense that this is somebody who's kind of being set up to look like he's a clown. I guess we'll find out. Now, another point, the overlap is with the Epstein files and Dan Bongino. Deputy FBI director under fire after internal emails reveal Epstein redactions. So, in this case, it turns out he knew for a long time now that they were going to be redacting this. Dan Bongino once made a name for himself as a MAGA-aligned commentator and podcaster, one who was outspoken about the need to disclose files related to the Epstein case. Now, as deputy director of the FBI, he's under fire over his knowledge of the massive effort to redact the files, according to the Daily Beast. And I think that was coming from Bloomberg, I think, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's right here. Bongino joined the FBI as deputy director under Cash Patel in May. At the time, he claimed the Trump administration slow-walked the Epstein files. The act of slow-walking the Epstein files was part of an effort to protect the victims of the deceased financier and underage sex trafficker. Since then, Daily Beast noted he'd gone silent on the subject, like everybody else has noticed. Over the weekend, Bloomberg published a report detailing the FBI's massive effort to comb through and redact large parts of the government's trove of files related to the Department of Justice Epstein investigation. Now we're talking about the supposedly coming release of the Transparency Act, and they're redacting left and right. It says part of this report include, like we all knew, by the way, if we're being honest with ourselves, part of this report included internal FBI emails showing that the Bureau made Bongino aware of the redaction project as early as the day after he became deputy director. And yet he's out here talking about the opposite. Now he goes on to argue that it somehow was before. The response doesn't make any sense to me. The reality is either before or after you got the email, you've known from the beginning that there was going to be a massive redaction effort, and you've been out there acting like full transparency. So these people are all trying to manipulate you. I think this is what politicians do, or people that are striving to be politicians. And it says Bloomberg's report found that FBI officials called in over 1,000 agents to help with the redaction efforts in order to prepare them for potential release to the public. The administrator's resistance to disclosing the files and reports of these redactions added fuel to the longstanding allegations that they could potentially implicate President Trump, once close friend of Epstein. Prior reports from CNN claimed that Bongino was enraged by the DOJ's handling of the Epstein files, particularly a statement from July, which Pam Bondi insisted was that there was nothing in the files. Remember that? And it warranted new charges against third parties, and that there was no client list. And Bongino, at the time, skipped work and threatened to resign. Remember that? And then it didn't happen. And he fell right back in line, because that's what honorable people do with principles, right? They toe the line when the hard thing comes around. Well, at the end of the day, it's important to realize that he was aware of this. They're redacting. They're deceiving you. Clearly, this is continuing. Now, what's interesting is the victims' names. That's the entire premise for why they're redacting, so they claim. I think we all know it's because they're probably hiding things about government connections. I think that's obvious, whether left or right, all of it, in my opinion. Here's what I find most insulting. On the 30th, Massey points out, in an attempt to stop our Epstein Files Transparency Act from passing, Speaker Johnson directed Oversight Committee to conduct a parallel effort that never exposed a single criminal, but sadly, in their effort to deflect and make it look like something was happening, they released the names of dozens of victims. I mean, guys, you almost can't make up this kind of stupidity. So they're over here going, we can't release anything because victims' names. And then to try to sabotage the one that wants to release everything, they release a bunch of victims' names. Now, I think that was just incompetence, if you want my honest opinion. I'm just blown away by this. And as I wrote, I said, not wanting to expose the victims was the excuse they all gave to withhold information. And now in their effort to stop all of this and try to fool you, they seem to have released a bunch of names of victims. As I keep saying, clearly corrupt, but also shockingly incompetent. It's just, and this gets so little attention, it blows my mind. Because the entirety of the government, the media apparatus, and all of the major alternative media, which is like 99% of the influential media, don't want you talking about this. Thomas Massey says, this is yesterday, if Epstein files are a hoax, which Trump continues to say, why did Speaker Johnson fight the bill? Why did the FBI spend $1 million trying to redact it all? Why is it Pam Bondi giving out binders? Right? Why is the GOP oversight subpoena? Why did the oversight committee subpoena the estate? Why did the Justice Department open the investigation? Why did Donald Trump sign the Epstein bill? You just can't hide from this, guys. It's so obvious. Oh, how did I end up with this over here? Oh, there it is. Okay, so how did I end up moving this all the way over here? Who cares? I'll skip it. For those in the podcast, this is where I think I just moved to the wrong section when I was organizing. Let me skip past it. It's the part about the putting people in jail for a meme. So, bringing this to the Prospera, Honduras, Venezuela overlap, which I think is just shockingly important. And I'm hoping that I'm gonna get this clipped by Jason to make this just a section we guys can digest. But I want to include this again, as usual, the technocratic regime change. Under the guise of freedom, technocrats are slowly taking control. Really think about that headline, guys. That's what's happening. So this is in 2024, September. I talked about this because I stumbled across Prospera. I recognized Peter Thiel's connection. I think it was because it's all sourced in the source material here. There was somebody who I saw it from. I cited them because I always do. And I saw somebody share it on Twitter. I said, Peter Thiel is associated with that? Well, that's weird. We were talking about that up into coming into the Trump administration. We were writing about the concerns of Palantir way before everyone was talking about it. And I recognized the weirdness about this and what they were doing there. And I just went into that alone, and it was unnerving. And then day by day, it became more and more clear that this is not just one project, not just like a technocratic trial. This is bigger than that. This is freedom cities. This is smart cities. This is the new direction that I think, the new style of governance with AI, with tokens, with crypto, with digital IDs. That's what this is. And this is the trial. They're doing it in the ocean. They're doing it in all kinds of different places. Seems to be the main focus. Now, what you're going to find is that Honduras and the people that Trump pardoned and the people that Trump wants to be in power are all complete connection. They are backers and involved in Prospera. So they are trying to keep people in the government that are the people that created the justification to allow Prospera to be put in Honduras against the wishes of the people and some of the government. This is just really important to understand that this is the beginning part of this larger technocratic change, I believe, and the kind of the example of the way they want the world to operate. And the people, and then just the smaller focal point of today in Honduras shows you that Donald Trump, whether knowingly or not, is leaning in and manipulating other countries' elections in order to make sure the people are in power who allow the technocrats to get what they want. I'm talking about just right here in Honduras, but it's probably all around the world. I also include the tag for just Prospera, that includes the discussion here. Musk and Trump call to federalize Washington, D.C., and this discusses the very same point about Thiel, Andreessen, Musk, and the idea of freedom cities and the possibility that that's going to start in D.C. and the overlapping points. Just a hypothetical, but the point was the same, and we went deep into the idea of what this was. And then this one is important. Pronomos Capital and the rapid transition to a techno-feudal state. That's the idea of the way I think they see where the world is going. And these are little trial balloons for the way that they're driving this, and Trump is sprinting in that direction. So this article is going to open some eyes. I'm new to this platform. It's called vcinfodocs.com, but it has a pretty good reputation for being kind of a niche, independent, investigatory platform. I was just looking into it to now, like I always say, to me, it's about the information and the source material. It matters where it comes from, but it's a smaller fraction. But it does matter. So I was looking into it just to see who they were in the background. And so all this together, I'm going to remember this platform because this is important stuff. And it brings together a really big picture. So this is from, this is a recent article. Where's the date again? I think it's the bottom. And it's talking about Prospera. And the title is A Network State Colony in Honduras. Now, this was being discussed before the recent Honduras conversation with Trump. We're going to get into that next. And then even overlap that with Venezuela and 5 other countries, by the way, in the Southern Hemisphere. Prospera is a network state settlement. Now, that's an important term to remember going forward. That is good. The network state colony, the network state, it's what I described. It's what they're calling the CEO-run, crypto, technocratic state run by corporations, and many other things we'll get into. Prospera is a network state settlement on the island of Roatan, along the Honduran coastline. It is funded by Pronomos Capital, backed by Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, and founded in 2017 by CEO Eric Bremen. Actually, I forgot I was going to look more into him. If you know any thoughts on him, throw it in the chat. And this is what's important for the point today. One of the many things, construction began in early 2021. So remember the date for the overlap of the transition of the Honduras government, and recognize, like I've been saying the entire time, that ultimately they regime changed the government, which they did. That's the U.S. government. It's on the record. I mean, they deny it, but it's a very provable discussion. I think it was 2009. They overthrew the government regime change in order to allow Mark Andreessen and Thiel to begin this special autonomous zone right out of the Sustainable Development Goals, create a special zone independent from the government, despite what they want, and to start their own little technocratic hellscape. That's how I describe it. And in 2021, or rather, my point was in between that time, they arguably lost control of the Honduras government. That's what I was looking into it further. Plenty of other argued the same in their own arguments about foreign policy. And that's why the current government does not want Prospera and actually has fought to push it out and has revoked all of their influence. And they're suing them for it. But they're not leaving despite it currently being illegal, because I have been saying that they're waiting for the new government that the U.S. puts in place to allow them to continue. So 2021 is very relevant for when they started construction, because they began building and all this started the transition, and they've continued regardless of what the law says, and are hoping that they put the U.S. government allows the legal structure, or make it simple. They put a government in place that allows them to keep doing what they're doing. So it says, although they are currently involved in a massive lawsuit against the state of Honduras, Prospera has expanded and is developing another ZEDE, or however they pronounce it. It's a special autonomous zone on a port location on the mainland. Prospera has stated, quote, Prospera's announcement of the port of Satui nearshoring hub in Honduras is a game changer for the nearshoring movement in the Western Hemisphere. Understand, the Honduras government has said this is illegal, and they're expanding, they're building new ports. And so literally they're stealing land from the Honduras government, from people of Honduras. They were allowed this location, which was done through illegal action in the first place. Now, even if you don't agree with that, the new government says no, they've revoked their allowance and they're just expanding. This is colonialism, guys. This is expansionism. They're growing and seizing territory. This is globalism. It's everything we're talking about. And so understand that the ZD special discussion has expanded beyond that. I talked about Crawfish Rock. They mentioned that in this. It's a town that has been screaming about this, that they're trying to absorb them, and they don't want that. Why would that be something we pretend is libertarian? Now, it goes on to say, one more thing. Let's be clear about they saw the momentum in the Trump team, which has now clearly lost its momentum. But why did Meta and Mark Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel and all the people go, we're libertarians? Because they thought that's what you wanted. And so they projected that, like Elon Musk and all the rest. They just yelled at you what you wanted to hear. Most of you, I think, are starting to realize that's what happened. But just understand that these people are not libertarians. What they're doing is not about that. They just believe that's what would trick you into believing that. That's my opinion. Prospera's effort to commandeer the strategic trade location and set up an economic headquarters demonstrates that their ambitions for Honduras go well beyond what they call crypto tourism. Prospera is also looking to set up cities in Africa as Prospera Africa. based on the same model. More information on Prospera Africa can be found in the link right here, which we'll probably go into in a future show. Guys, this is the globalist overlap. This is technocracy, globalism, Zionism is built into this, which we'll see with the overlap to Gaza. What do you think that is? We'll come to it in a second. Gaza is the freedom city. It's the same discussion. Tokenization, digital IDs, digital money, a technocratic control structure. That's what they literally call it. It's all right in front of you. And so all those three things are clearly intersecting with what this all is. Prospera is built on what they call a ZEDE. I've been just calling it a ZD. I don't know if that's what they pronounce it or not, but ZEDE, or a Zone for Employment and Economic Development. The Honduran name for a special economic zone, which, again, if you look into this, I've been saying that every time. If you look into the sustainable development goals, that, you know, you can look in and you'll find this a sustainable development, or what was it? Autonomous zones for these kind of actions to change in a number of things. I'm telling you, it's right out of the globalist sort of great reset, all of this stuff. And also the overlap, like we just showed you, to the 15-minute digital. This is what it all is. Freedom City, digital 15-minute city. There's another one I'm forgetting. But this special economic zone was set up to allow them to be sort of independent from the country in which they operate. Why would any government or country agree to that? And it says, and by the way, ask yourself what happened to all the people that were there before that. They just are automatically now in this. We'll get into some of the stuff they're doing, which will make it more important to understand what they're dealing with. According to the Latin America Working Group, the ZEDE is a, quote, fancy term to cover up the fact that foreign investors, and this is important, can buy territory and hold complete control over a large portion of land within the state of Honduras. Whoa, okay. So now we're literally talking about colonialism from foreign powers through the argument that what you're doing is giving them libertarian freedom. And really? This is the same old construct, guys. Now, how much you want to bet? Well, let's be clear. Israel and Zionism are right. They're part of what Teal and the rest of these people are doing. They proudly tell you that. So recognize whether it's happening in Honduras or in the middle of the ocean or in Washington, D.C. What it opens the door for is foreign investment to control land within the United States. Trump's the one talking about freedom cities. They're the ones funding freedom cities, and here's what they're building. It's very easy to see. That's not a secret, by the way. The Pronomos Capital Point, I closed it already. That's the company, that's the working group they're using to fund all these things. They are funding the Freedom City direction. And they're saying, and if you read the outline of the Freedom City direction, they reference Prospera as what they want to do. So this is not a debate. This is the same conversation. And so what you're allowing is foreign investors that can buy U.S. territory and hold complete control over that territory. But let's just go ahead and pretend that's America first, okay? Founders, investors, and proponents of the ZDs market them as sovereign, free market cities operating outside of Honduran law and governance for the purpose of foreign development and innovation, without the necessary legal applications of the Honduran regulatory system. Prospera currently has 2,000 or so physical residents and e-residents. Now, I believe it's more than that since this article was written. 2,000? Well, you've basically taken this huge swath of land that they don't want you to take, and you're expanding, and you've got 2,000 people. Guys, this is not about people. This is about something much different and darker if you understand what I've been covering, and you're about to see more. It also goes on to say, and it hopes to achieve a population of 38,000, by randomly chosen 2030. No coincidence, no big just, I don't know, by 2030, I guess. And they reference that date at 3 times in their endpoints. Teal, Andreessen, Pronomos, Prospera, people involved. Why would they be aiming for 2030? Well, you know why, if you understand what's going on. And it says Pronomos Capital is the venture capital firm behind Prospera. That's what I was saying. Located in California, which is interesting, of course, when you recognize the conversations they have about Newsom in California, and they're literally based out of California. The investors include Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, Peter Thiel, Patry Friedman, grandson, interestingly enough, of the free market economist Milton Friedman. That's why many people seem to think wrongly that this is some kind of a libertarian overlap. And it says Joe Lonsdale, of course, of the PayPal Mafia, and Balaji Srinivasan, author of The Network State, which is the same, that's the conversation. And he is closely associated with Mark Andreessen, or rather Mark Andreessen Horowitz, which Andreessen runs. Pronomos is investing in startup cities like these ZDs and other network states around the globe, including many in Africa, some in the middle of the ocean, some all over. This is literally happening, guys. And it's not an independent secret thing. This is a networked building. I mean, this, like I said, this is about, I think, changing the way that everything operates for the benefit of their CEO, technocrat, Zionist, globalist controllers. Now, you can call me a conspiracy theorist. You can call it as crazy as you want. It's right in front of us what they're doing. I'm just giving you what it seems to be to me. But don't deny what we're looking at. Call it what you want. It's right in front of you. And this is not in the interest of Americans. It's in the interest of this globalist worldwide agenda to change the face of how we govern ourselves. Because guess what, guys? They know the globe, the human species is getting tired of government. I've been saying this for a while, and I'm not just saying it because I believe it. The same thing with the two-party illusion. How about we just focus on the U.S. government? I do believe it's a global thing. Just like we saw the transition from sort of the current government structures from the feudal states. You think that just happened organically? Things change because there's controlling changes. There's no why. That's very clear to me. And so what we're seeing, in my opinion, is another one of these transitions, that they're deciding that this is just not working the way it is. So we need to transition to something different. Now, you know my opinions about what that is. I believe this is a starting point. The legislation creating the Honduras ZD was pushed aggressively by a right-wing narco government. Surprise, surprise. Guess who that was, guys? Juan Orlando Hernandez. The legislation creating these Honduras ZDs was pushed aggressively by the very person Donald Trump just pardoned while pretending he's fighting narco trafficking. And he is currently, at least up until recently, serving 45 years in a U.S. prison for, quote, conspiring to distribute more than 400 tons of cocaine and related firearms offenses. Apparently work with the Sinaloa cartel, the very same cartel that Trump pretends he's fighting right now. It just all becomes so ridiculous when you care to look just past the surface. Understand that this guy, remember the 2021, they're building Prospera in 2021. From 2014 to 2022, the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez in Honduras was allowing this to happen, not because it was in the benefit of Honduras, but because it was in the benefit of their agenda. This is very clear. And it says the current president of Honduras, and this was at the time, Xiomara Castro. So that gives you, actually, I believe this was, here, let me do this real quick. Ask it, that's a quick question. Or maybe just do this. This might give you a 2022, it looks like. Just it's based on the article and link to that person. So anyway, the point is it's saying the current the president at the time, Xiomara Castro, understands the devastating, right now I believe it's Rixie, or no, it's not. Hold on. Let me do this one more time. I just want to make sure you guys got the facts on this because it's important to know what's, let's see. Okay, yes, I take it back. I was just mixing up her name for some reason. This is the person who we talked about in the first place. Her name is, was it Xiomara Castro? She is the one who said that Honduras they were attempting to regime change Honduras yet again. That's the one I've been referencing the entire time, saying that she was calling out Trump's administration, saying, and Biden before it and into Trump, that they were trying to overthrow their government. Again, showing you the consistency of the agenda between left and right. Okay, so back to the point. So this is correct then. So I would argue this is more of a recent. It's saying the current president right now, after the election right now we'll get into, is currently being tallied. So I don't know if that means technically she's not. I think technically they stay the president until the next person's sworn in. Yeah, that's right. And so she is the current president, understands that the devastating impact that these ZDs have on the local villages and communities in Roatan and the mainland of Honduras. So she's been adamant about this, calling this out. Now, she has endorsed, I think the name is Rixie, who is currently running from her party. Now, hopefully that's changed, but last I checked, she was the lowest on the two Israel supporting people that U.S. backs are the ones that had 40% of the vote. And they're screaming election manipulation. It's an interesting point. But she is saying this is bad and where it's going is going to get worse. Upon her election in 2022, right? 2021, they built Prospera and they continue to. She gets elected in 2022. Clearly, they lost control of this because she was adamantly against Trump's agenda and Biden's agenda and against Prospera. And so they lost that control. And so my point was that through all of this time, from 2022 until now, they're illegally present. And I think they're just biding their time in hopes that Trump will put someone in place that will allow them to continue. It says Honduran Congress, after she was elected in 2022, repealed the law allowing the ZDs in Prospera. Gone. You're not allowed to be here anymore. And they didn't care. Think about that. Think about the lack of respect they have for any other country other than what they think want, the US, the UK, the ones controlling everybody else. Or at least that they know that they have the backing of the US, which Honduras will be concerned about, right? Now it says late in 2022, Pronomos Capital filed that lawsuit we talked about against the government of Honduras in retaliation for what? For them illegally manipulating themselves into their control. And they're seeking $10.7 billion. Now, I think last time I said 1/3, it's actually 2/3. 2/3 of the entire GDP of the country. So like I say every time, and even the New York Times before argued it seems like they might win. What if they win this? Somehow, and remember, the Supreme Court has been manipulated, at least before 2022, to be the people that were supporting what they were doing. And that's why they got the designation, right? So they're going to go to Supreme Court that's on their side and say, give us 2/3 of the Honduras GDP, which means all of their assets. Okay, and they win and they absorb everything. Well, that doesn't end the government. But they just get to stand there like they're the government, but Pronomos Capital will be the ones running Honduras. Kind of the way it seems to be going. And who knows how it's going to go? We'll follow up on that. And it says in the controversial investor state dispute settlement court, what they're going through in this. The court battle is ongoing. However, the Supreme Court ruled that all Zs in Honduras to be retroactively unconstitutional in September 2024. So remember, this was back in 2022 when this started, and that's still closer to when I believe they had people that were more amenable to their agenda. Now, 2 years later, in 2024, the Supreme Court ruled against what they're doing and says that all of it is unconstitutional, and still they remain. And still they keep building. And it says more recently and unrelated, the mayor of Roatan, person's name is Ron McNabb, ordered a temporary shutdown of Prospera's offices until they had paid their municipal taxes of over 12 million, about $478,000 US. So they're not even paying. So they're literally bucking the entire thing and saying, screw off, make us leave. We're waiting for Trump to put us back in place. And they were ruled unconstitutional. They haven't paid their fee. What does this look like to you guys? This looks like a new form of regime change, doesn't it? And it goes on to say, the mayor has said he does not recognize Prospera as another nation or country, while Prospera's PR team aims to convince the public that their investments and job opportunities have been crucial to the growth of Honduras state. It just simply hasn't. My opinion, clearly, but look at what they've done. They've absorbed and they've taken. They're not really helping anything but their own growth. And it says with Honduras elections that was on the 30th, and they're tallying right now, and I imagine maybe you know in the chat, maybe they've tallied all up. There has been significant movement by the United States to interfere in the election. We'll go into that in a second. It's very clear. Even Trump's statements would be considered that by the U.S. if any other country did it to them. According to a statement from Progressive International, many Honduran political figures, including presidential candidate Salvador Nasrallah, and who, by the way, is very pro-Israel, and numerous members of the Honduran National Congress, attended a Western Hemisphere subcommittee hearing in the United States chaired by United States Congress, chaired by Representative Maria Elvira Salazar, who she's out here screaming about this right now, a far-right proponent, they write, of U.S. intervention in Latin America. So these people met with them about what they were going to do in the election. How in the world is that not election interference from a foreign power? And it says the hearing was framed in Washington as an urgent assessment of the situation in Honduras. Guys, they don't care about free elections. They don't care, but they want people in power that will do what they want. I mean, if we don't know that by now, whether Biden or Trump, we're children. It's so shockingly clear. You don't deal with Mohammed bin Salman and these other groups that are worse than anyone else they claim they're fighting and act like they're not complete hypocrites. Or look at Bukele or anybody else. It's just it's self-evident. Going forward, it says the hearing was framed in Washington as an urgent assessment. In reality, the hearing sought to preemptively question the legitimacy of Honduras's electoral institutions to cast doubt on the democratic process. I argue it's because it was clear that the one who didn't support their agenda was the one that had most support. I think, just like in Venezuela, I think it's really easy to prove. So if this turns out the opposite, I think we know what they did here. That's my opinion. And it says, and to prepare the ground for claims of fraud before a vote had been cast. Doesn't that sound like what they do in this country? They fill the conversation with, fraud before anything even happens. So then you're ready to call it out, whether it happens or not. And it says one that threatens, this represents a dangerous escalation of foreign interference. one that threatens the integrity of the upcoming elections and echoes a long history of external interference in the country's political life. Indeed, and again, that's back to 2009. That's more than that too. This has been happening from the U.S. government as far back as I can look. Indeed, there is a long history of the United States interference in Latin America to secure American investments. And they go back to one of the earliest cases that's very public, as in the case of the United Fruit Company. Now, in this, they literally overthrew a government to help the United Fruit Company. Now, you think it's different today? They just have a different narrative, guys. Now we see a new age of interference, including attempts by the U.S. government to secure a regime change in Venezuela and the propping up of Bukele and Milei by tech billionaires. This platform is doing a good job of really bringing in the bigger picture of how it all ties together. Venezuela, Haiti, right? I mean, all of this stuff, it's very clearly coming together in something alarming. And I think it's what I'm discussing here, I'm convinced is a large part of it. But by no means am I saying it's the only part of this conversation. Could be. Reuters reports that Asfoura, Tito Asfoura, is the one that Trump was outspoken supporting. Asfoura, and by the way, was the one who was, outspokenly pro-Israel, literally said that his whole thing was about a triangle between Israel, Taiwan, and the United States. And then openly calls for things that are like Honduran people are not supporting. It's about Israel and U.S. agendas coming to Honduras, or the Prospera point, which you'll find out he was also involved in, which is the bigger point of this conversation today. Reuters reports that Asfoura's party forged a close partnership with Washington under former president, guess what, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who governed from 2014 to 2022. Hernandez, arrested shortly after leaving office, is serving a 45-year prison sentence in the U.S. after his conviction on drug trafficking, right? So again, 2021, they began building because they had the backing of this corrupt person that they all supported. Then in 2022, they changed off I just read her name, Castro, who very clearly did not support this and then rapidly removed their ability to do anything, and they didn't care. Hernandez, arrested shortly after leaving office, who up until yesterday was serving a 45-year prison sentence in the United States after his conviction on drug trafficking and firearms charges. I mean, it's just embarrassingly stupid. Both Asfoura and Hernandez are of Honduras' national party, which most in the conversation who are focused on this topic are saying is that's the party that's co-opted by the United States. The ZDs were championed by Hernandez during his administration, allowing Prospera to enter the country and build the colony. Trump has also stated he will pardon Hernandez, which he did. You must see how this is all interconnected, guys. The endorsement comes, you could make this as simple as Peter Thiel going, Trump, do this, right? Or Israel, for that matter. And he would follow suit. Or they're all in it together and they're doing this for something else. The point is that this is not about freedom or democracy or liberty or anything they claim to fight for. It's clearly about getting what they want at the expense of everything else. The endorsement comes even as candidate Salvador Nasrallah has publicly endorsed Trump. Salvadoran dictator Bukele and Argentina President Milei promised to pursue a security model based on El Salvador. Great. Where's the cool dictator? They're literally telling you, we want an oligarch sort of kakistocracy. We want our corrupt situation that benefits the people that we call what we like around us and will yell freedom and say patriots. I mean, these people are all frauds, guys. And it says, and they've all been seen wearing Bitcoin paraphernalia. I mean, do we not recognize how clearly this has been co-opted? The co-opting of freedom, Bitcoin sleight of hand, and the new AI control structure. This was an IMA panel we did. It's so obvious that they're taking this that was supposed to undermine the government control. Here we are where their government's using it to bolster their position. And all the patriots are screaming. No, all the sellouts are screaming. Whether you're making money or not. And it says these positions demonstrate a clear alignment with the tech fascist axis. See, they get it. They see that there's an overlap to all of this that goes beyond one or another of the conversations. It's an intersection of all of these things. Nasrallah, founder of the Savior Party of Honduras, which they call the PSH, faced criticisms in 2021 after a document surfaced that revealed the involvement of Oscar Malara, a PSH advisor, in establishing Prospera in Roatan. So literally everybody talked about from Juan Orlando Hernandez to the guy that Trump literally wants in power, who might very well win, were all the ones that allowed Prospera to be there. So now my point again about waiting and biding their time until Trump can force in somebody who can let them continue their criminal activity, here we are. The document was an agreement between Malara's law firm and Brymont Investments, a company owned by Eric Bremen, the current executive director of Prospera. The anti-ZD's presidential candidate, Rixie Moncada, who's the one running right now, who is large part of the platform is that this is not what anybody wants in this country, and we will remove it. She faces a tight election. It looks like she's probably going to lose, and has stated, quote, "The ZDs are a public-private corruption scheme." Think about how crazy it is that we went through the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, the COVID-19 overlap, and the they call themselves the world's leader in public-private partnerships. And what did all the Republicans do? The same thing we did, or large group. We fought it. We said, hell no. What they're doing is alarming. It's globalism. It's technocracy. It's all coming our way. And then they do the same thing and call it something else, and they yell freedom, at least the ones that are blinded or too dumb to see they're being played. This is a public-private partnership, or the public-private corruption scheme, as they call it. We did, and this is what the candidate said. We denounce the lack of legality, because it's obvious that's the case, in its ICSID proceedings, and that's the court they're going through, as an international body that has opened the case of the Prospera ZD and its associates who were not originally involved in the operations, but who have seen an opportunity to join in the looting. So it just seems they've created up an entirely corrupt system that they're using to force their way back into control. This is what you get when you've got literally endless resources. Not actually literally, but just, in the world of billions upon billions of dollars, they can do whatever they want. Villagers and community leaders like Vanessa Cardenas and Louisa Connor of Crawfish Rock, as I've mentioned many times, a community neighboring Prospera, has been very vocal about the negative impacts that this has had on their community. Connor, the president of the local community association of Crawfish Rock, says Prospera deceived us big time. What I've been trying to tell people, they said they lied to them. They told them it's going to make their lives better. It was going to change everything. And then they screwed them. That's what they do. And another part I've reported on that is that the people in this town are arguing that they're being told they're going to be absorbed by Prospera. That's not libertarian. Vanessa Cardenas and Louisa Connor have stated, quote, "The Prospera ZD cropped up out of nowhere one day, and we have seen devastating environmental harm to our community ever since. We were not consulted. No one asked if they had permission to build or what that project would entail." See, they're lying about everything, guys. And the reality is that this was only done because they don't care about Honduras. They're taking because they manipulated themselves into position, because that's what they do. Whether we're talking about technocrats, the U.S. government, Zionism, it's all the same thing in my mind right now, to a degree. It says, "We were not consulted. No one asked, had a permission. We have been in this territory for centuries, and the foreign investors keep expanding." That's what I was talking about. "Since they arrived, the environment has changed. We're experiencing floods for the first time. Our river has dried up, threatening many species and plants." Why? Because they co-opted things within their territory, which screws everybody else. Understand what this is. Foreign investment taking at the expense of the local people. Just wait until it's happening in the United States, and then maybe they'll care about it. While locals and the Honduran administration struggle to combat this invasion, 85 economists around the world have signed on in support of Honduras' fight against this. Crypto, it says. They argue Prospera runs on crypto. Well, again, doesn't that seem relevant to how they're now co-opting the way Bitcoin is being used? And we're seeing these sharp drops and declines. I mean, this is something going on right there, guys. We're being manipulated. And it says, through its this is actually fascinating to me. Crypto, they claim, runs Prospera, right? Even though it's outlawed in Honduras, and calls itself, quote, "one of the most Bitcoin-friendly jurisdictions in the world." So how is it? I mean, it's outlawed in the country, and yet you're going to argue that you can. I mean, you can same point. It's pretend you may not care because it's Honduras. Imagine this was something you care about. Imagine this was your neighbor, your next year, the next, one of the states in this country, and there was a law that you cared about, and they came in and just took what they wanted and said, "Well, we don't care. We're not in this country anymore." Like, that's literally what they're saying. They're not part of Honduras. So why would we allow them to do that in this country? Because freedom cities are being promoted by these people and Trump in the United States. He talked about the new Wild West and the new, all of that. That's what they're talking about. Prospera and medical experimentation. I brought this up many times. Prospera evades the laws. Oh, and for the podcast, every single one of these things are sourced back just to claim that you can research for yourself. That's why I like this platform. Prospera evades the laws and policies of any country under the guise of progressive innovation and free market ideology. Right. These are the kind of regulations they want to remove, not ones that make your life better or restrict, give you back some kind of liberty. It's regulations that were put in place because big, evil, powerful things will try to do what they want because they're powerful and they can. And it says allowing them to conduct accelerated medical trials. Now, that may not sound bad. Maybe even you think that's a good thing. The truth is that these are the kind of things they're doing there that go way beyond medical trials. Bioengineering, biogenetic. I've talked about this from their own discussions. And then something like that that ends up in your side of the world. Well, did they study it properly? Or who's accountable for that? You have to really think this through and understand that these things are not in the interest of anything we talk about. It says in 2021, they installed a medical facility called MiniCircle. We've talked about this too. MiniCircle is a gene therapy company that has been promoting the fact that they're basically doing whatever they want in Prospera. It says they installed MiniCircle that not only launched trials for medical experimentation, but built an additional ongoing pop-up city inside of Prospera based on the idea of not dying and extreme longevity for the tech class. Yep, same conversation here. This is when Jim O'Neill was placed in the CDC. And he was an outspoken believer in the longevity experimentation and transhumanism, and they all jumped for joy. I went over it in this show. Teal or Dreesen, they were all like, all right. They were all super excited about the future because this guy believes in what they're trying to do. Experimentation to extend life as long as, but not for you, for the technocrat elitist class. That's always how this goes. And what's important about this is these are what they're doing in this overlap. Where was it here? Oh, I guess I lost. The point was simply that this guy put in place in CDC, and he is outspoken about these kind of overlaps. And this is what I argue this is being sort of initiated through their influence over the Trump administration. And so when they're talking about not dying and extreme longevity for the tech class, they're talking about doing these kind of experiments on people, on other things in this area because nobody is looking. What happens if something causes, look, think about gain of function. Think about what they're doing in regard to, any number of other experiments and how easily that can cause something that hurts far more than people inside their territory. Many number of things they're doing. Think about nanotech and genetic alteration, and these things are happening in here, and they're happy about it. Prospera also houses over a dozen medical startups projects focusing on longevity, cybernetics, and organ replacement with the use of AI and a decentralized science approach inside their permanent hub. It's called Vitalia City. Now, for those that want to see these develop and you want to believe they're acting with good intention, it may sound like a great place to expand and try to make lives better. But you have to understand, Teal is the one that started the Ambrosia Company that was literally about using young children's blood to put inside people that are older to help them live longer. What's funny is I see things like that, and you get certain people that go, that's so fake, as always. Ambrosia, the startup harvesting the blood of the young, from The Guardian. They made a joke about it on Silicon Valley, the TV show, right? This is real, guys, and it went defunct because it's insane, and obviously creates a black market for blood of children. It's pretty crazy, and historically, this goes back to what I think it was Cleopatra, and was it her, one of the historic dictators or whatever you call them? They were bathing themselves in children's blood. They thought it made them live longer. Really not a new sentiment, guys. More science, I argue, behind what they're trying to do here, but it's still terrifying. So overall, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. And not just that, but stuff that can effectively spin out of control and cause problems for literally everybody in the world. I don't know why we're okay with that. MiniCircle is funded by US-based venture capital and seeks to create a destination spot for unregulated, risky medical experiments, including biohacking and gene editing. Right? Welcome to the COVID-19 overlap, guys. MiniCircle boasts that their ability to operate without any government oversight. Quote, the scientific community in Honduras asked the Honduran authorities to investigate and stop genetic testing and experiments. I mean, where do you think they're getting their people from? Probably people in Honduras, unsuspecting. That'd be my opinion anyway. And it says in 2040, the only one example, by the way, that it wasn't 20, there's like 3 examples of them citing 2030 as the endpoint. In 2040, Prospera could be a multi-jurisdictional network state with dozens of different locations or prosperity hubs that are under their legal and governance framework using their technology stack and management practices. Okay, so here is the Infinity City group working on longevity research saying, hey, by 2040, Maybe this will expand to the point to where there'll be states all over the place. Okay, what does that sound like? Remember, these are places that are not controlled by the governments in which they operate. So what that sounds like is the expanding encroachment of their control structure, of their new state that just takes from other people. Nothing new. Ask Israel. They do it every day, right? That's what they're doing in another guise, in a new form of governance. I hope I'm wrong. Colonialization. ZDs and their special in economic zones and private cities are developing all over the globe via the network state model backed by Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, who are literally puppet stringing this administration right now. The network state is a form of colonial destruction through digital and technological means. They seek to gatekeep land and resources from citizens and residents, implement their own rules and policies within their own arbitration center, exploit local workers, and ostracize the public while maintaining a very sophisticated propaganda machine. Despite a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit, Prospera continues to operate and expand, encouraging people from around the globe to become residents and or start their businesses utilizing their autonomous territory while they're currently in a limbo state of being completely illegal, not paying their dues or whatever you want to call it, completely operating independent of anything they claim their agreement, their contractual obligations. And then you're suing them for not meeting their obligations? Guys, these people are completely unaccountable. They are billionaires. They're some of the most influential, powerful people in the world, and they're doing whatever they want. It should be concerning. So, again, this one, I argue, is a really important one if you haven't watched the show. What they're doing through Pronomos Capital is exactly what we just outlined. And it is what I argue the rapid transition to a techno-feudal state. It seems like what they want to build. And Nick Cleveland Stout on the 21st of November said Representative Castro calls out lobbyist Carlos Trujillo for testifying to Congress about upcoming Honduran election while representing Honduras business interests opposed to the ruling Libre Party. American billionaire-backed Prospera gave Trujillo firm $105,000 over the past year. So you see, there's more going on here, and it all seems to stem back to what they, and look, you could argue that this is just what their current interest is. You know, that they'll manipulate, lie, and cheat and steal to get their project done no matter what it is, because that's what they do. I'm of the mind that what this is bigger than one thing. This is them using their power and influence to manipulate an American billionaire backed Prospera and gave the politicians money over the past year. And here we are arguing about why this needs to happen. It says it's very rare we have registered foreign agents and a registered lobbyist sit in the chair where you're sitting. That almost never happens. So when it does, I think it's important to discuss that. Guys, we are being manipulated. It's everywhere you look right now. So to overlap this, importantly, with what's happening in Honduras, as Brian Berlechtic writes, and I think it's important to think about, it wasn't just USAID, and that didn't even end, by the way. That was one of the many lies. Trump promotes the National Endowment for Democracy, Soros interference in Honduras. Despite Trump pretending to have dismantled the National Endowment for Democracy and being, quote, opposed to George Soros, while hiring Soros's right-hand man, Scott Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, Trump is now openly fronting for the National Endowment for Democracy Soros-funded interference in Honduras. The NED and Soros-funded fronts like media outlets, Contra Corrientes, regularly attack the opponents of the U.S. puppet of choice, Tito Asfora, same one Trump supports. I think it's because he was told to. I don't even think he knows these people at all. And it basically says, see the report on this from below. Stop listening to the empty rhetoric and outright lies about freedom, communists, and narco-terrorists, and follow the money. He says Trump picked up exactly where Biden left off. If you are really honest with yourself, you'll notice that's mostly what's happening everywhere you look. And narratives are surely different. They scream them too, but the actions are going in the same direction. I've been saying that for multiple administrations. Hopefully at some point people recognize the consistency of nonpartisan objective reporters. And it says, and is using his supporters' ignorance to blind hope to accelerate their shared agenda of duping Americans, robbing their tax dollars and wasting it on empire and meddling abroad while America rots out from under the divided and distracted people at home. Here, Wyatt Reed points out that yes, indeed, today in the morning, officially, and here's the number behind it, convicted drug trafficking dictator Juan Orlando Hernandez has been pardoned and freed by Donald Trump after serving just 1 year and 40 of his 45-year sentence for importing 400 tons of cocaine to the United States. He goes, but yes, I'm sure they want to overthrow Venezuela to stop narco-terrorists. How embarrassing. Well, first he said this: democracy is on trial in the coming elections in the beautiful country of Honduras. This is what got my attention. I said, I knew it. I knew this was coming. Will Maduro and his narco-terrorists take over another country like they have taken over Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela? He's just making this the narrative to go, that's why we have to take over. Even within that, even if that is the case, how is that the peace president? How is that, whether dictators or not, is that what you are? You claim you voted for no more wars, and now you're going, but it's not the same thing because he's bad. Well, that's ridiculous. It is the same thing because it's war, it's invasion, it's conflict. It's only because you don't know what to do when you want to support him and it contradicts what you said was going to happen. Own it. And this is what I think is hilarious. Acknowledge, be like, well, yes, he did say that at the time, made sense. Well, here's a new thing and now it's important. Hey, that even makes sense. But they can't do that because inside they know they don't want this and they're lying about it. This is not what he promised. But anyway, back to the point. It says, the man who is standing up for democracy and fighting against Maduro is Tito Asfora, the guy who screams about Israel being involved in Venezuela, as well as the fact that the guy who was part of allowing Prospera to come in through Orlando Ortiz, the one he's pardoning. And of course, tied to the same party, the National Party. Tito was the highly successful mayor. He goes on to say, Rixie was the one who likes Fidel Castro, so therefore you should ignore that she has policies that actually care about Hondurans. And it says, normally the smart people of Honduras would reject her. And this seems to be his always go-to. But people are being fooled. So basically, you're dumb if you fall for her. I guess it works for some people. It's just sad. A borderline communist, which again, communism is no different than any other form of governments that allow consolidation at the top. People will argue till they're blue in the face, the opposite. History, you can look for yourself. There's examples of government that lean that direction that don't end up the way they claim. There's examples like this one that completely end up worse, that are, I mean, I shouldn't say, objectively, depending on what you're talking about. I meant worse than the one I pointed to. But the point is, all governments have the ability to collect at the top, and they want to. It's not about what they call it. It's about the idea that they will always abuse you. Governments shouldn't be here in the first place. But it goes on to simply point out this is the one he wants. The people of Honduras must not be tricked, he says. The only real friend is Tito Asfora, the one who worked alongside the drug trafficker that got arrested and allowed Prospera to buy off and steal Honduras. And bring the needed aid to Honduras. Right, now it's about aid. I thought you were talking about why would we, like your whole conversation was about the left and giving aid to all these countries. And now it's like, let's give them aid because it's not even about that. Aid's not even part of this, guys. It's about control. But you'd think he would be smart enough to not say that with what he said before. But maybe there's something about them looking stupid. I don't know. Then he followed up and said, I think it was the next day, if Tito Asfora wins. Oh, wait, let me make sure. This was, 2 days later. If he wins, because the United States has so much confidence in him. So what this shows me is that they were recognizing that's not what the people wanted. It was clear that it was going in the direction. And so they came out and goes, basically bribe. If they win, then all these great things will happen to try to coerce and manipulate people. That's what it looks like to me. And it says, and what we will do for the great people will be very supportive. If he doesn't win, however, the United States will not be throwing good money after bad and basically threatening to do bad things to your country. It's very transparent. It says Tito will be a great president. The United States will work closely with him in order to success and blah, blah, blah. Additionally, it will be a granting of full and complete pardon for Juan Orlando Hernandez because they're the same conversation. That's why I included it in the same discussion because they work together to allow Prospera to be put in place. It's not secret. And it says this cannot be allowed to happen, especially now after Tito wins the election when Honduras will be on its way to great potential. Or what he says, just continuing. He says, vote for Tito for president and congratulations to Juan on your upcoming pardon that you gave him. It's a weird thing to say. But it said, this is as of the 1st. It says, looks like Honduras, this is fascinating. Looks like Honduras is trying to change the results. Now, actually, let's do this first, since here is as of a moment ago. Maybe I should refresh it and see what it says. But right at the moment I checked, Tito had about 40%. Nasrallah had about 40%. And 19 to 20 from Rixie. Now, both of these two people support Israel over Honduras. Remember what I said? They set this up as a false binary, but the reality was Rixey was the one that was speaking for Honduras, I argue. Now, what happened here is after they screamed in the conversation, acting like there was election manipulating going on, and then, from my opinion, the person who had the most support suddenly doesn't win. We know how they operate, guys. I'm not saying I can prove that, but I think it's pretty clear how this has ended up. Now, let me do this. See if this alters it. Who is winning the Honduras election? Yeah, it's not resolved at the moment. It's about the same. 41% to Tito, of course. I mean, guys, it's obvious that what they wanted was Tito. And I'm willing to bet you that's what's going to happen, despite what it seems Hondurans actually state they want. And I'm not saying I can prove that, but just from what I can see historically, it's pretty clear, like most of these countries, like Venezuela, these people are not dumb. They can see what's been done to them in the past. It's like Prospera or any other point. They've been regime changed by the U.S. government before. If I know this, they know that. So the point is that they recognize how this goes. And there's only one voice in there that's saying only Honduras. The others are saying U.S., Israel, Taiwan, and both of them support Israel, the United States. And they're both seem to split the vote. That seems pretty interesting to me. So here is what Trump said. Looks like Honduras is trying to change the results. Now, why would you say that? Why would you undermine it when you see the person you want winning? And it says, if they do, there will be hell to pay. The people of Honduras voted in overwhelming numbers on November 30th. The National Electoral Commission, the official body charged with counting the votes, abruptly stopped counting at midnight on November 30th. See, they have no idea what's going on. So they are sensing, this is my read, they're worried that because they stopped, that they're going to say they cheated or whatever they did altered something, or they're manipulating this or whatever it is. And so in this unknown moment, Trump just rushes out and goes, "There's something's happening. They're trying to cheat." But on the record, you can see that the person he wants is still winning. This is belligerent to me. The way that they operate is why people aren't falling for this today. And it says their count showed a close race between Tito and Nasrallah, both of which I argue they get what they want. And it says Asfura holding a narrow lead of 500 votes. That's what it was before. It seems like it's gone up a little bit from there. Their tally was stopped when only 47% of the vote was counted. Now, by the way, they could be cheating. That's always possible, but there's 1,000 reasons why that might happen. It says their tally was stopped when only 47 was counted. It was imperative that the commission finish counting. Why does Trump feel he even has the ability to stand up and direct what people can do in foreign elections? It's belligerence. It is hubris. The very guy who once stood up and said, "We will not be the policemen of the world," and then literally went on to do exactly that, like the rest of them, but he loved to claim the opposite, right? I can go off on 1,000 things he said. It goes on to say, lastly, hundreds of thousands of Hondurans must have their votes counted. Democracy must prevail. I can't even say that without laughing from people like this who have they laugh at you when you think this is what's happening. And of course, Wyatt Reed, Hondurans voting in today's presidential election faced an unprecedented range of foreign efforts to meddle in their democratic process, thanks to the U.S. government and its preferred local proxies, the National Party. A brief rundown on plots to steal the Honduras election. That is Juan Orlando. This is the guy. I believe that was him, right? Let me double check. I saw a picture of him earlier, and I just on the top of my head, I don't want to misinform you on that. Let me know in the chat if you believe. My belief, if I remember correctly, what he looked like. I only saw one picture of him today. I believe that was Orlando Hernandez. The point was either way that his close connection to them is why, the Honduras government being manipulated from outside powers. And I think with the Prospera overlap, it's pretty clearly about the kind of technocratic invasion of this area. And these are the people that have allowed that to start from the first place. But my point, I was thinking I should use this picture because narco trafficking, pardoning him, it's just sad. And honest people can recognize that. But it says most obvious effort to rig the Honduran election has come via Trump's statements demanding voters cast their ballots for Tito, which you know what they would say. If that was China doing that to them, they would lose their minds. So that's obvious, right? He says Trump has presented no evidence that Hernandez's trial was based in any way biased, nor has he explained how then President of Honduras could have been unaware of the massive cocaine trafficking. Because here they are saying it was all a fraud. You have Kellyanne Leavitt out there doing her job and blindly repeating what she's told to say and ultimately saying that it was all a fraud. And they set him up. I mean, it's not even remotely what the evidence shows. It's certainly possible, but this is the point. They say that The evidence shows something else, and they just yell over the top of everybody. Now it says the other major plot to steal the Honduran election is an attempted electoral coup, which was exposed last month when audio recordings surfaced showing a high-ranking National Party legislator conspiring with his party colleague on the National Electoral Council. So you see, they've been trying to manipulate this situation from before, and clearly they're just either too inept or too spread thin to be able to know they're going to do it. And I think that's what they're undermining right now. I think Trump is worried they're not going to get this to happen or whatever it is. This is just what my gut tells me, but I could be wrong. Based on the way the election's going, it doesn't make sense that he would do that right now. It says in the files, the legislator, Thomas Zambrano, can be heard speaking CNE counselor Cassette Lopez and a member of the Honduras military. The trio discuss a plan to, quote, sow doubt in the electoral process. Well, that's what Trump's administration drove into reality. And generate suspicion among the people that there's going to be fraud. Now, you understand, this is them discussing this on leaked video, audio, not looking at it, but saying, this is what we're going to say. And now here they are saying that. We're going to say that they're going to manipulate the CNE advisors so that the results favor the electoral crisis is created, says a voice matching the National Party's Zambrano. Think about how insane this is, guys. This is how clumsy they are. Or I guess that they think they can get away with it. And then again, the post right here. The Miami-based interference campaign culminated in a congressional hearing chaired by the diehard anti-communist Representative Maria Elvira Salazar, where Libre's candidate was accused of trying to rig the elections and impose communism on Honduras. One of the key speakers was Trump's former OAS ambassador, right? The OAS was the very group that lied about Bolivia, and then when it got overtaken by a military junta, they went perfectly quiet. So they're over here going, democracy, we need democracy, because it was stolen, even though it wasn't, and all the evidence suggested otherwise. He was one of the most loved politicians in that country. And then the military takes over because the U.S. wants that, and then they just back away. Where were all your cries of democracy when military ran the country? And when that lady was placed in power, they're just complete hypocrites. Now, one of the key speakers was Trump's OAS ambassador, Carlos Trujillo, the one I was referencing earlier, who complained about the Libre Party's suggestion that it might kick U.S. troops out of the military bases they operate in Honduras free of charge and recognizing China instead of Taiwan. See, Taiwan, Israel, United States. That's the point of the people they want in power, guys. Trujillo was promptly identified by Representative Joaquin Castro as a key lobbyist for a large bank whose founding president led the National Party for years. And the so-called Prospera Charter City, a self-proclaimed startup zone with regulation and tax autonomy established under the National Party, which hosts a variety of human augmentation tech companies on Honduran land with no oversight. The current Honduran government has been fighting for years to shut down Prospera, which is suing them for $10.7 billion. It's pretty clear what's happening. All the while, the National Party has seemingly been operating massive disinformation campaigns known as the New All Network, which consists of series of circular-facing fake news websites distributing AI-generated content meant to disparage and embarrass the Libre Party, Rixi Moncada. You realize if let's just say it was happening in the United States, you literally have these, it's kind of like what the independent mainstream alternative media is doing, but you've got these fake, as they say, how do you write it? Circular-facing fake news websites. They're just pumping out absolute nonsense using AI-generated fake content. The point is, in this country, I'd like to believe anywhere right now, but we would go clearly call that out. It wouldn't work because I think right now people are highly attuned to AI for that part, but just manipulation. But the idea is that this is being test run in other countries that maybe aren't as attuned to that. And so you have an area being run, again, influenced by the very technocrats we were talking about, and they're testing this AI-generated fake news network that seems to be manipulated. Maybe that's why they muscled votes away from Rixi by claiming she was doing something that wasn't happening. And who's going to hold them accountable for that? It's just very clear what's happening to me. Featuring over 100 domains, 100 different domain names, the New All Network advertised heavily on social media platforms, spending thousands of dollars to ensure its anti-government propaganda got millions of views. So funding the numbers to make it look like it was prominent. That's what they do. The network was traced back to Fernando Ceramido, an Argentine politician operative who's closely tied to Javier Milei, and who's worked for other Trump-aligned Latin American politicians like Javier Bolsonaro. Wherever Ceramido went, baseless claims of electoral fraud quickly followed. Polls closed at 4 p.m. This was on the 30th. The vote tallying will continue. It's apparently to this very day. It remains to be seen whether the soft regime change playbook will work once again or whether Hondurans refuse to take control over. Now, I argue, at least, I mean, I'm sure Wyatt would agree, it's possible that that it wasn't soft and that the rollout of the manipulated election, well, I guess that it would still be, if you're just altering the vote, that will be a soft regime change. So I guess the argument would be like, even softer would be sort of like a propaganda effort to convince the voters otherwise. I would argue that's the same thing to a smaller degree. But what I'm arguing, I think he's saying the same, is that this was they simply rigged the election. And that wasn't like a military regime change, but ultimately, in effect, it's the same outcome. And I think that's what they do today. Wyatt Reed doing great work. Oh, and then in general, this was my point about Asfoura. This is what I was telling you before. Asfoura, the one who seems he's going to win, the one that Trump wants in power, has positioned himself as a strong advocate for close ties with Israel, aligning the U.S.-backed foreign policy priorities. Well, yeah, right. So his priorities are what U.S. government wants. Does it sound like what Honduras? I mean, it's so obvious what they do. You think Hondurans are voting for U.S. policy outcomes? It's just so plainly obvious. And it says in a July 2025 interview, Asfour outlined his international agenda as a triangle between the United States, Israel, and Taiwan, which we just went over. This mirrors statements from rival candidate Salvador Nasrallah. So both of them are they're supporting Israel. They support the United States. But as far as emphasis on Israel has been highlighted by pro-Israel circles. So he's the chosen one of the two that both will give them what they want. Well, they hope that those two choices will box out, which appears to be the case, the one person that actually people want. And it says, he says, who praised Asfoura, Trump did, as a partner against narco-communists. You mean the guy who literally worked with Juan Orta, or like on the name off the top of my head all of a sudden. Hold on, what was it? No, I closed it, didn't I? I think they referred to JHO. Juan Hernandez Ortega. That's frustrating. Anyway, I fixate too much on when I can't remember things. The point, though, the guy that clearly was the one that Trump just pardoned, the guy who was the narco trafficker who got caught with 400 tons of cocaine or was involved with that and was pardoned despite being ruled by a U.S. court found guilty. He's calling the guy who worked with him partner against narco-communism. It's just insulting to your intelligence, guys. And it says in August 2021, Asfoura met with the Israeli ambassador to Honduras to discuss a joint project and strengthen bilateral ties of their alliance with Israel, and realize Elad Golan is one of the people we've talked about who's been consistent through the genocide, gaslighting and lying, and spewing bigoted, hateful, anti-Palestinian sentiments. And on top of that, Hondurans don't want an alliance with Israel, as best I can tell. Like a lot of these countries don't, for obvious reasons. Described as having good friends in Israel for facilitate. Oh, it's right here. It says JOH. His name is in here somewhere. Right there. Juan Orlando Hernandez. How did I forget that? Okay, so now Asfoura is described as having good friends in Israel for facilitating the embassy move, of course, and cooperating on U.S.-led initiatives, which almost always are at the expense of Hondurans, because that's what they want, apparently. Now, Hernandez regime received Israeli training for riot police and military post the 2009 coup. See how obviously this comes together? Now, amid human rights violations, the point is the U.S. government overthrew them in 2009, put an administration in place that would allow Prospera, that would allow Israel, would allow the technocrats, which I see as all the same thing at this point. Not literally, but at the point that it's all the same agenda right now. And so what you're seeing is that the guy Trump just pardoned, who worked with Asfoura, was not only trafficking drugs, but working with Israel, allowing them to come in and train people within their country. We have to see the common threads here. And last, it says alleged narco trafficking links, U.S. endorsed, which I just went over. The guy he just pardoned is a drug trafficker, was outed in the Pandora Papers and other very clear examples, was found guilty in a U.S. court. Pretty sad. Former president of Honduras is freed from prison after Trump pardon. You can read the article from New York Times if you'd like. Now, unfortunately for time, I'm going to have to wrap up here, but this was an article I was going to go through a little more, and we'll do it in the next show. Trump pardons convicted narco-trafficking poll amid plot to rig Honduras election. Now, this is more than a one-day conversation in general, but this goes further. Yeah, so that was him. This is further into the deeper conversation of Hernandez, right? And what he not, and this is right now we're talking about Asfura and Tito Asfura and or possibly the other guy, or hopefully the one that actually will fight all of this. But this is from before who Trump pardoned, and it goes back to when this was allowed to happen in the first place. So there's a lot of important backstory here to what was happening. Simply at the top, Trump is threatening to destroy the Honduran economy unless the country elects the oligarch-run National Party. Now he's even pardoning the last party member to rule the country, who was convicted in 2024 of smuggling hundreds of tons of drugs into the United States. Pretty sad. Oh, and let's not forget, by the way, so I'll read actually this first part because it relates to this. He was sentenced to 45 years in a New York prison in 2024 for his role in helping smuggle 400 tons of cocaine into the U.S. in a drug-running scheme linked to the Sinaloa cartel. Right. You mean the state? So Trump pardoned the guy while Trump claims he's fighting the cartels and drug trafficking. Okay. Well, also, let's not forget that cartel family members were allowed to enter the United States with a deal with Donald Trump. And guess who those guys were tied to? The Sinaloa cartel. You can't make up how dumb, how stupid all this is. I just don't know why people can't see this. Let's not forget that Corbett did a great show recently. The CIA is still shipping in drugs. Not a secret. They've been doing it their entire existence, but they're fighting narco drug trafficking, right, guys? Oh, this is for the article here. I'll come back to that. And on top of that, here is what Leavitt had to say. The people of Honduras have highlighted to him how the former president was set up. Right. The guy, I'll listen to what she had to say first. It's only a short clip.
By Admiral Bradley was the one who gave that order for a second strike.
And he was well within his authority to do so.
And a separate question, the president...
We'll get into that, by the way, not more today. I'm going to skip largely past the last part. But Hegseth is trying to basically shuck off responsibility to one of the underlings, or an admiral, but technically under him, right? Which is always my point. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. If you're in charge, you own it, man. If you're the leader, what everyone does underneath you, you own because you're in charge. People like that aren't actually in charge, or they're just not meant for that position. And so what he's doing is basically going, they made the choice, they killed him, the whole double tap killing of the boats, which we know clearly they all support. Now, this question is about Hernandez.
Several days ago said it was his intention to...
Within his authority to do so.
And a separate question, the president several days ago said it was his intention to pardon the former president of Honduras, who was a convicted drug trafficker. And yesterday on Air Force One, the president said that if someone sells drugs in that country, that doesn't mean you arrest the president and put him in jail for the rest of his life. How is that different than what the administration is accusing Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro?
You're cherry.
Yes. Or how is that different than people in boats selling drugs? How do you know that they weren't the first time they ever did it? So is it different because it's the president? Well, yes, because Trump is trying to set the idea that they're special. Presidents, because, Netanyahu should be pardoned. I can't be held accountable. Like, that's what they're doing, guys. That's what they want. But the reality is obvious. The principle's the same. You don't get to just argue. And also, it's not just him being involved with a drug sale. It's so much more than that. But it is the same idea. On top of that, from what I can see, I don't see any provable evidence that Maduro is literally involved with the trafficking. It wouldn't surprise me. I would argue it's probably to some degree happening, at least kind of passively, like allowing or making money from. That's what I think of governments, guys. But my point is, show the evidence. They don't have it. If they had it, it would be everywhere in your face right now. Maduro has not been proven to have been involved in this. They simply show you overlapping connections and claim what they want. And over here, Hernandez was found guilty and caught. Now you make the case of which one should make more sense.
In jail for the rest of his life. How is that different than what the administration is accusing Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro?
You're cherry picking the president's statement a little bit yesterday, as he also said yesterday the people of Honduras have highlighted to him how the former president Hernandez was set up. This was a clear Biden over prosecution. He was the president of this country. He was in the opposition party. He was opposed to the values of the previous administration, and they charged him because he was president of Honduras. There were some other...
just a lazy argument. So the reality, of course, could it be political persecution? Of course. But as always, make your case. They'll never try to prove it because the reality is he went to court, they laid out their case, and he was found guilty. Now, yes, that can be manipulated too. But if you believe that and you know that, then prove it. It's just the reality is always the same. It's just a narrative laid over what they want, and they hope your blind followers will go along with it without any due diligence. And on top of that, the guy is clearly not he's not some freedom fighting libertarian. He was the guy who was involved with basically selling out Honduras to Prospera, as well as tons of other human rights things we can get into. These are the people they support, guys. They support Mohammed bin Salman and the Saudi Arabian dictatorship and regime. They support the UAE and Qatar and Israel's genocide. They support these people everywhere you look. It shouldn't be that confusing at this point. And Aaron Melnick rightly follows up and says, in regard to her ridiculous statement, it's ridiculous. It was the first Trump administration which developed the cases against Hernandez. And isn't that just perfect? It's like everything else we've talked about. And he cites the things you can read for yourself. It's look it up for yourself. Just like the asylum and the DC shooter. Or what was the other example I was just thinking of? What was that? There's many of these. What bottom line is that Trump's administration was involved with the case against him. His brother, Tony Hernandez, was indicted in 2018 and convicted in 2019. That's Trump's administration. And key allies were indicted in 2020. Both were later sentenced to life in prison. There's no way you make this make sense with what they were just saying other than to recognize they're lying to you. Here we are, guys. Wake up. Now, lastly, and more so in the next show, and I'll probably brush over each one of these, but I want to go more into Venezuela for a larger point in general. But this Jason here, Zaharis, I'm new to the account. He just called himself a journalist and geopolitical analyst. I like this thread. He just put together sort of a thread. He says the United States is now targeting 6 Caribbean, Central, and South American nations with military aggression. Now, my point is to think about why all these are happening at the same time. Now, I have my opinions. I'm going to get to it more in another show, but we're talking about Venezuela. We're talking about Cuba, which these have been ongoing for decades. Nicaragua, same point. Mexico, to some degree, the same point. Colombia, which is sort of a new one, but we've seen the shift in their conversations, right? Haiti. And he says all of these theaters of conflict are linked to each other. And I agree for more reasons than he's even pointing out here. What we are witnessing, he writes, is an attempt by the U.S. to revive the Monroe Doctrine. And it's willing to carry out a second Operation Condor to do so. Now it says Operation Condor was a coordinated U.S.-backed attempt to wipe out opposition to dictatorships, the ones they supported is the point, across South America, like they're doing right now in the 1970s and 80s. Some 50,000 people were estimated to be killed or disappeared, like with Nicaragua or the fruit company, any number of other overlapping situations. Pretty much in every single country in South America, they have intervened to allow a dictatorship to take control, like Pinochet, for example, because they wanted something from them or they wanted influence in the area. They allow it to be taken by people who are morally ambiguous because they will allow themselves to be bought off. They will allow U.S. to stomp in the country and do what they want because they benefit. Otherwise, you got people that are like, well, I'm maybe not even morally sound, but people that are like, well, I kind of want to do what's best for the country too. Get that guy the hell out of here, right? We want someone who will sell out for everything we want at the expense of the people they support. That's what they want. I'm not saying people they fight are always the good guy. The reality, though, with like a Gaddafi or an Assad is you can prove, despite the screeching narratives, that they also did do a lot of good for their people, regardless of the narratives. Look into it. And so not good, or they, could be. My point is I'm not saying that they're absolute good people, but at the end of the day, they end up supporting the worst of the worst. As many people, like you can stand back and look long before all this. The U.S. government, along with their allies, have been consistently funding the worst elements of pretty much everything they've always claimed they're fighting. Whether that's the Islam discussion or whether, you could go back as far as you want. They have been operating like this for quite a long time. So remember this because it's going to continue and you'll notice how all of this seems to come together. Now, Matt Kennard points out, you've probably seen all this, Trump literally spoke up and just decided to shut down the airspace of Venezuela. That is an act of war, period. This is obvious where this is going. Now, I shouldn't say it like that. I still don't know for sure. I still kind of don't even think that it makes sense for them to actually initiate war. I kind of feel like it's a threat that may just tumble into that because they're incompetent, but something about that just doesn't make sense to me, but I could be wrong. But nonetheless, I knew that I get the sense this has been drifting in this direction because they want to covet what's there. Rare earth minerals, oil, gold, one of the largest lithium, and apparently gold, oil, and lithium, some of the largest deposits in the world. And it says, not a single plane flying over Venezuela, a country of 30 million people with the world's largest oil reserves. Its airspace has been closed by the U.S. president sitting in the White House 2,000 miles away. International law is chimera. or chimera, however you pronounce that. You know, it's what's the best way to frame that word? You know, it's like evolving, shifting. It's never nebulous, right? It's just like it doesn't mean anything. Let's see what it actually defines it as right here. Fire breathe. Yeah, I mean, that's what I knew it from. It's like a fantasy book kind of thing, right? Like something that can shift shapes and whatever else. An illusion, fantasy, delusion. Yeah, that's the same. So basically, it's just not what it appears to be. It's illusory. What they do is scream those things: liberty, freedom, law, you know, and then just absolutely spit in its eye. World is run like mafia, and Washington is the dawn. It's pretty secret. I mean, it's pretty obvious, guys. So Rand Paul, comes out, quite a big difference, and says the Coast Guard reports that over 3/4 of the boats that they have stopped have drugs. Now, first of all, why we would believe what the Coast Guard says or any other extension of the government is beyond me. Now, it's probably more likely that, you know, an extension of like random Coast Guard people or even the leadership might be less likely or prone to want to lie, but it's the same point. If the government says something, we should immediately go, probably not, but consider that it could be, right? It's honestly the smartest stance because consistently, historically, they've been lying to you. But still, just be objective. Make sure you're questioning that it could be real. But right off the top, that seems to be something that they say to like show, hey, see, we're getting people with drugs. But Rand Paul makes an excellent point. That's a great job and an admirable record for accurate information. But he goes, if it's true, by the way, but he goes, but it's not so great if you're droning them instead of arresting them, right? It means you're literally killing a boat full of innocent people every fourth time. 1 out of 4 potentially being wrong is too many. I mean, think about how insane it is that they would make that argument. What it shows you is they're desperate. You're coming out and saying, with 3 out of 4 are drugs, so you're killing an entire boat full of people without due diligence? Doesn't that prove that you didn't know in the first place that any of them did? I mean, it's just this to me is incompetence, period. It's absolute, no foresight, no thinking through what this actually means and just dumping out it's probably something that Trump's team just told them all to say. You can decide for yourself. First, again, I don't believe that's even probably true. I know that there's been some drugs, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, there's no legal reality here. They don't have jurisdiction. That's international waters. Plenty of the countries in the area don't actually even care the same they do about drugs. And on top of that, there's proof that they were turning around in one case. Most of them weren't even going to the United States. Even if they were, there's no legal reality until they were in your waters. This is a crime, guys, which anybody honest has been saying. This just makes it even more insane that they're literally admitting to at least 1 of the 4 being full of innocent people. The Pentagon keeps saying that every boat they strike saves 25,000 lives, Ryan Grimm points out. Well, again, speaks to their stupidity. They've now hit 21 boats, which would be 525,000 people, right? That's what they claim. However, fewer than 100,000 die from overdoses every year, and very few of them from cocaine. So if every boat they save 25,000 lives, well, then you've somehow managed to save 425,000 people that didn't die in the first place. Magic. Or they're lying to you, like they do about everything, it seems. The difference with Trump versus Biden or any other is just that they're just bad at it. Or they think they're smarter than they are, or both. Marjorie Taylor Greene comes out. I mean, I'm curious to see where this goes, by the way. Quick side note. You know, will she resign? Maybe not. Maybe she'll just say that now to gain support and then not. Or maybe she will and she was always honest. Or maybe she will and she'll run for president. And I'll think it's always been planned. I'm curious to see where it goes. I would like to believe some of these people are genuine, whether I agree with their opinions or not. She comes out and says, fix health insurance, not regime change in Venezuela. Duh, right? Obviously. And Clown World says, what a libtard. You see, these people have lost the plot. Glenn says, opposing regime change wars and instead using American resources to improve the lives of communities of Americans, which, by the way, was a foundational belief of the America First movement until about 13 seconds ago, is now decreed to be libtardism. I mean, Cat Turd, Benny Johnson, they're all doing the same thing. It's just sad, guys. I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter. I just think, I hope people like this who are out there screaming the thing that everyone, this must be embarrassing. There must be more behind why they would continue to do this when even the Republicans are calling it up. I don't know. I find it hard to believe how anyone could rationalize looking that stupid. DD Geopolitics makes it even more clear. Here, Clown World is saying, what a libtard. And remember, she's saying fix health insurance, not regime change. What a libtard. Here he is, back in March 2025, I paid $2,900 for a root canal 2 months ago. It's absolutely insane in the United States. Right. So it's crazy. And health insurance is bad, but we can't say that because Trump doesn't want us to. So you're a libtard. No, you're just stupid. That's just mind-blowing to me. Now, Sagar says it's genuinely disconcerting how many people just buy the fake Venezuelan drug cartel lies and how many people don't seem to know that Maduro literally offered up all of his oil assets to the U.S. Now, I don't know if I would frame it that way. The way I read that when it happened, and maybe I'm missing part of it, is that it wasn't like take everything, but they was trying to initiate some kind of a deal with Trump to stop what this is. And Maduro basically tried to make a deal for some of their oil. And Trump, I mean, quickly jumping ahead, Menjosin, this is back, I believe this is 2020. This is after his last administration and during Biden's administration. He says, we buy oil from Venezuela. When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. As always, Trump just yelling the loud, quiet part out loud. But so what does that show you with this overlap, right? So before we even get to Clay's point, is that you've got Trump telling you that the oil and you know, that they basically want to take everything they can from it. We should have taken them over. Not about anything other than taking what's theirs. And so when he says these genuinely disconcerting about people buy the fake story about the drug cartel lies, they don't know he literally offered up all of his oil. Why wouldn't Trump have taken that? Well, I think it's because it wasn't really even about that. It's about the control over the asset, not simply gaining, whether over the top or not, from the situation. And so Clay Travis says, I mean, I'm going to get to what Megyn Kelly said, which we talked about on AM Wake Up today. I just am blown away by this stupidity. He says, we should take out Maduro if he won't voluntarily leave power. A democratic Venezuela, as if that's what they're going to put in place. These are the big pundits of today? My God. And it says, given their oil assets, it's an important strategic ally. Yeah, we'll freedom them, but, you know, we might as well steal from them because they, you know, freedom. These people, guys, this Clay Travis has 1.3 million followers. And this is what they're selling people? I'm just blown away. And he goes, take their oil, strategic asset. And they're smuggling of illegal drugs, which they are killing nearly 100,000 Americans a year. He's also pushing the lie. So they're killing almost every single person that dies from drugs the entire year with cocaine that doesn't even do it. Clay Travis is an example of either somebody who's towing the line because he's part of the team, or he's too blind to see that he's just accepting what the government says is happening with zero due diligence. Either way, guys, these people are not worth your time. If you want to do your due diligence, listen to what they say, consider it, look for the source material. But you have to wean your time here. There's plenty of good people out there that are giving you sourced research material that's objective and nonpartisan. They're way more worth your time. I'm not even talking about TLAV alone. Plenty of them are out there. And it says, the killing of 100,000 a year is a direct attack on the country. No, it's not, man. That's the dumbest argument in the room, but that's what's happening across the board right now. That somehow that's what constitutes a war. And so now it's an insurrection because they're invading or whatever you just spin these things into to make yourself make sense with the narrative while we're watching them destroy this country. You guys will be remembered as the people who literally clapped as this all collapsed. You are the violins on the Titanic as we literally watch this break apart. It's sad to me, but hard to look away, isn't it? It's like a train crash. Stick to poor pricks in the sports markets. The Rush imitation is coming up way short. Robert Barnes making fun of him. But he says it's genuinely disconcerting because they are. Now, they're buying it because people like Clay are pushing it. Here is an insulting one. This woman, Representative Maria Salazar, we were just talking about, she literally says that Maduro is giving uranium to Hamas. This is how lost they are. Do you think she even believes that? Hamas? I mean, what are we even talking about now? They've lost the plot. They're off the reservation. What she's doing is trying to convince you that the plight is the same. Go after them here because, you know, Israel and stuff, and they're fighting for their freedom, I guess, from people that hate Jews. Just, I don't know, just stop. Just support what our agenda is. Like, she just kind of loses it in this, and it just kind of blends. These people are trying to get you to do what they want, and they no longer know how to sell it because this is the junior team. Not all of them are new, but I'm saying is this is what we've devolved into over the last 50 years. The worst of the discussion. Gina says, correct me if I'm wrong, but Trump is trying to free Venezuela from a dictatorship, and Democrats are somehow against it. Got it. Oh, is that what's happening? Because Trump said, very wise. But Glenn says, and this is the best way, even if that's what he's actually doing. Is Trump trying to stop narco terrorists? Or is he trying to avenge election fraud? Or is Trump, who reveres the Saudis, Qataris, and Emiratis, against dictatorship and wants to free the world's oppressed peoples? He says, who cares? It's a new war. Just celebrate and be happy. The point, Gina, is you're all hypocrites. You can't just keep jumping from narrative. Trump says this is what we want, and then you act like it's absurd to disagree, even though you just told us, peace president, no more wars, or that he's fighting to stop dictatorships while working with the Saudis. I argue these people, I mean, I'm not even familiar with Gina, but I argue a lot of these people, look, she's got 15,000 followers. It's got 2 million views. Are we pretending like this platform's not shockingly slanted towards certain conversations? This is about go after Venezuela. 2 million views. Thanks, Elon. Way to work that out with 15,000 followers. That's not even like a hot take. It's not some kind of insightful sentiment. It's just a dumb, pithy, ridiculous statement to make you think that the Democrats are against a good thing. It's just insulting, isn't it? My point, though, is people like this are just going to go along with whatever the next thing is and will happily ignore what they were selling 30 seconds ago. Senate Republicans says Nicolas Maduro is an illegitimate leader responsible for encouraging drug operations. Well, I'd love to see you prove that. It wouldn't surprise me, but you've never actually proven that. And on top of that, he's not an illegitimate leader. Despite you guys screeching about that, it's been upheld by almost every other country aside from your little circle. And I mean little. I mean, I'm like UK, United States. It's pretty clear these days that people are recognizing the independent election observers like they did last time. Those drugs kill more Americans every year than the number of American soldiers lost in Vietnam. This is what they're still trying to push. And this is why the blind idiots out there yell the same number, because they follow what they're told. It says, as long as Maduro is in power, American communities will suffer. Oh, wait, let's see what the Mises Institute said. It says, this is a war propaganda lie, even more absurd than Iraq will give al-Qaeda WMDs. No more aggressive regime change wars of choice. No war with Venezuela. This is what most Republicans seem to be saying right now, other than the blind followers. My opinion, look for yourself. It says, this is WMD level lie from GOP Senate for regime change war with Venezuela. They also promoted the OG WMD lie for Iraq. The vast majority of Americans' overdose deaths are from fentanyl, which Venezuela has virtually nothing to do with. And remember, they started by claiming it was fentanyl, then realized we weren't dumb to that degree and just they just stopped making it about fentanyl. They didn't even say cocaine. They just stopped saying that. So people can keep assuming. But you'll still find is far too many Republicans still talking about fentanyl from Venezuela because they're being lied to. And it says, which Venezuela's got virtually nothing to do with. Removing Maduro won't affect this at all. Well, because as Glenn also points out, it has nothing to do with drugs. Just doesn't. This is Salazar. She says, Maduro is the last wall between tyranny and a free Venezuela. Well, we've heard this lie before. And we heard it when you put people in power in other countries. We heard it about Libya before you destroyed it. We heard it about Syria before you destroyed it. We heard it about Afghanistan before you destroyed it, right? This guy will be welcomed as heroes. How many times can these clowns keep pushing the same lie? It says nearly 8 million Venezuelans are waiting for that day. No, they're not. They say about Iran, and no, they're not. I'm not going to say I have the tap to know everyone thinks, but it's pretty clear from my perspective and my due diligence that that's just not true. And I'm not wishy-washy enough to just not say that. That's what I believe. And I think it's pretty clearly proven. Do your due diligence. I shouldn't say proven, that the evidence clearly shows that most people in Iran, for example, whether they support the current leadership or not, do not want anything from outside powers. Same thing here. Because they've been, for decades, manipulated, destroyed, undermined, and they're just tired of it. And so she's lying to you for that very reason. And Comrade Misty points out, same effing script over and over and over. How many times do they get to pull this before the sense of skepticism kicks in? I agree. This clip is just over the top. Let me play it first. I mean, it's disgusting.
Really do kind of not only want to see them killed in the water, whether they're on the boat or in the water, but I'd really like to see them suffer. I would like Trump and Hegseth to make it last a long time so that they lose a limb and bleed out a little. Like, I'm really having a difficult time ginning up sympathy for these guys who 10 seconds earlier almost got taken out by the initial bomb, but because they managed to get ejected, a little too soon, had to be taken out in the water. I realize legally it may make a difference, but truly, Mark, this is a tough case to really gin up the sympathies of the American people.
Yeah. Wow. You want to see them suffer? I mean, is that what a Christian would do? Because they're all frauds, guys. These are frauds. These are terrible people. She's the same one that said that Palestinians would rather see their children starve to death than help out a Jewish person or whatever, something very similar to that, which is just grotesquely disgusting and inaccurate. But what it is what they've continued to say and what they use to dehumanize the people that they're fighting. And she is a willing talking head for the government agenda. But to simply say that, first of all, nothing's been verified. And even if it is, there's no legal justification. And even if that's the case, there's no reality to think that you can punish people for what other countries don't care about because you decide. And she wants them to suffer. And then that she's hard to gin up sympathy for executing more people. Maybe the law will have some. Yeah. Oh, the law. Who cares about the law? You guys are out there acting like you're trying to enforce the law. The Democrats are the ones breaking all the rules. And you're like, but the law, who cares? It's disgusting. You guys are hypocrites. And what you're doing is demonstrating that you're just as ridiculous as the partisanship across from you. Because the same thing, guys. If you look at what they're both doing, they're dehumanizing the opposite. They're driving you to hate each other, and they're allowing the government to execute what they want. Now, I would argue I don't even think Megyn Kelly's smart to recognize that. But at the end of the day, here they are, doing the exact same thing. And here's True Stream Media. This psychotic response is based purely on trusting the government. I saw the same behavior after 9/11 in justifying war crimes and the destruction of freedoms. And worse, during COVID, to justify the destruction of people's lives. You see what objective, nonpartisan coverage looks like? To recognize it in everywhere the government operates, not just the one partisan side. Close one eye and hop on one foot and be like, it's those guys. Nope, it's everybody. It's the whole damn thing, guys. And it's embarrassing that we can't be real about that today. And I'm speaking to the minority that is the team sport partisan. It only gets more sickening with time, she writes. And I, for one, refuse to be desensitized to a point of ever pretending this is normal and not utterly repugnant. Well said. Scott Horton just says, kill, kill, kill. Blood makes the grass grow. It's just people are gross, man. Call it out. And here is what Kellyanne Leavitt had to say about why it's okay, why the legal reality is acceptable.
The follow-up strike was lawful. What law is it that allows no survivors?
The strike conducted on September 2nd was conducted in self-defense to protect Americans in vital United States interests.
Nope, doesn't fly. It does not. I don't care if what your argument is that drugs were going to the United States, which eventually could kill people, which therefore self-defense. In no world, in no country, I shouldn't say it like that. No court in this country. I was going to say the world, but who knows? Probably banana republics all over the place. Thanks, U.S. government. No court in this country is going to uphold that argument. You are not going to be able to prove in any way, shape, or form that is going to directly, you can't prove the correlation. You can argue that they might go that direction, but then how are you going to prove that boat was the one that would do it? It's not going to hold up. This is desperation. Now, I don't understand why they're pushing it. They could just do this without even talking about. I don't understand why it's going this direction. I get the sense that we will. I get the sense that it'll end up. Look, you can do all they're doing with Venezuela without what they're doing with the boats. I think there's a deeper narrative here. I'm sure we're going to find out what that is. Regardless of what the intent is, this is criminal. And they're calling it self-defense. Well, it's no different than when they bomb other things and call it self-defense because they claim they were about to do something. Well, that's not self-defense. That's action. That's attack. That's offense. But this is all they got.
The strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict.
Nope. Not even close. International waters, by definition, means you don't have jurisdiction. You don't have a legal precedent to be able to murder people in any sense. That's where the international courts come into play. That's where everything else. Imagine if China was killing people off the coast of the United States in international waters, claiming they were trafficking drugs. If there was a boat full of Americans out there partying and they bombed them out of the water and said, rules of war, what do you think Trump would do? Well, if Israel's involved, probably nothing. But since it would be China, he'd probably scream all day long about it. But what we're seeing here is the obvious reality that these people are hypocrites. It's just not the reality, but they'll yell it because they know their people will push it. And if it continues, then they'll literally change the precedent. They will change the current standing of the way these things work. And then I think they get what they want. Israel continues to do what it's doing because this is what they're setting. And as Justin says, this is not how self-defense works. Everyone understands that self-defense requires an immediate physical threat and proportionality. Not everybody, I argue, but this would be the legal understanding. And it says repelling a missile attack with a missile is self-defense. Blowing up boats hundreds of miles from the U.S. shores is not. It's not complicated. And then again, Trump just simply telling you back then this is what the goal was. But now it's about terrorism and narco stuff, even though you're literally involved with both, right? On top of that, to finish up, the U.S. military documents that The Intercept is reviewing are indicating plans to keep troops in the Caribbean, through 2028. No big deal. Well, peace president, though. #winning. Oh, and here's the other report that recently came out. This was 2 days ago. Oh, this was November 28th. Trump says U.S. will stop Venezuelan drug trafficking by land soon. And it got even further where I think the report came out where he said simply we might be invading soon or something like that. Don't take my direct quote, but there was another phrasing that he used that made it sound more like not drugs. Either way, why is this acceptable to anybody? No more wars? You can't keep pretending because he doesn't call it a war that's not an ongoing war. Or actions of war are the same thing. Declaring the airspace shutdown, that's an act of war. This is belligerent. It's not about drugs. Justin Amash also points out that Eric Schmidt said, and this is Schmidt with 2 T's. This guy, you can see his picture. He says, Democrats never wanted Pete Hegseth. He was a threat to the permanent Washington status quo. Hardly. He's literally supporting Israel. So I'm not even joking, but I wanted to make it funny. But it says they didn't defeat the nomination and they tried hard. Did they? I saw all the behind the scenes craziness. Oh, so trust him, I guess. Since then, there have been countless anonymous leaks to undermine him and thwart President Trump. Yeah, probably. That happens anyway. The point he's trying to make here is that Hegseth was a threat to the deep state, permanent Washington, even though they didn't want him. But ultimately, look what he's doing. He's fighting for freedom or whatever. The liberal media will never love you. And J.D. Vance is well said. And he goes, I'll add, we've been told for decades that the U.S. military must go everywhere and do the impossible all over the world. But the red line for permanent Washington is using the military to destroy narco-terrorists in its own hemisphere. And Justin Amash says, there's almost nothing more permanent Washington than a regime change war in Venezuela sold to the American people on the pretext of stopping narco-terrorists. What a well-crafted point. It won't matter to the people that won't want to care anyway. J.D. Vance is going, freedom, and they'll just buy along. This is fundamental. Look, take a step back to what Trump was arguing in regard to the deep state, in regard to the swamp. Look at Justin's point. Whatever you may think about him, and I'm not saying I even have negative thoughts, just regardless of the person saying it, look at the statement and think about it. What they're doing is exactly what he said he was fighting. Even the war point from this recent administration. And we can't recognize, these people are the permanent Washington. They're literally tied right into the globalist Zionist technocrat agenda. They just convinced you somehow they were the ones fighting it. And it certainly worked for a minute. Now, last 2 points have to do with Somalia. Just to add this on to the point, because remember, there's a much larger field of action happening here, but no one's even talking about this. Here's this last clip.
U.S. troops into fortified caves in Somalia to kill like 5 guys. And I think it's a good question as to why the U.S. military is still in Somalia.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. So I can assure you, right, this is an America First Department of War and president. So we aren't conducting forever wars in Somalia. We're not seeking regime change or, we're not nation.
Okay, I want to start over. Look at this person. Look at where we are right now. She's literally reciting some kind of scripted line that was going to be respite to any question. You're asking point blank, why are they in Somalia still? Don't worry. Actually, you know what's hilarious? We watched a clip this morning. I wish I had that right now from Steve on AM Wake Up. It was hilarious, this is exactly what this was. I can't even try to explain it. It's not going to make sense. If you watch the AM Wake Up this morning, you would laugh. This is basically, she's responding by, don't worry. We're not regime changing. We're not doing forever war stuff. Oh, okay. Great answer. Just don't worry. We're the good guys. Next question. This is pathetic, guys. And this is best they can. I think it's because people like this are the only people they can get in these positions right now.
U.S. troops into fortified caves in Somalia to kill like 5 guys. And I think it's a good question as to why the U.S. military is still in Somalia.
Thank you for the question. So I can assure you, right, this is an America First Department of War and president. So we aren't conducting forever wars in Somalia. We're not seeking regime change, or, you know, we're not nation building. But I will say that this department's narrowly scoped, intelligence-driven counterterrorism operations in places like Somalia.
You notice she's glancing down word, like every third word. She's just reciting what's written down, which is what most of them do. But it just shows you it's not like a real answer.
Alongside our partners, allow us to protect the American homeland from terrorist threats and to protect our interests. So we will continue to make sure that the American people are kept safe. That's our utmost priority. But, you know, we're not isolationists. We're also not neocons. We're realists. We understand.
Are you kidding me? Like, what is she, like 18? Is she just waking up to these buzzwords based on, of course, this is everything that they are. And it's not about left versus right. They're just trying to make it about like all the big boogeyman words about what they claim Republicans are doing. And it's like, no, we're the good guys. We're fighting the deep state. So shut up. Well, no, you're not. Is that all you got?
And that threats face the American people every single day. We take that incredibly seriously. But at the same time, we're always going to make sure that we're putting America first.
Yeah, you could have answered with that to literally any question. It wasn't about he asked about why you're still in Somalia. That was not an answer. We're not nation building. We're not regime changing. We're just kind of keeping everybody safe. So shut up. It just kills me. And from this person, it just, I don't even know if she could formulate an answer to that question, which is probably the way that I'm not even trying to insult her. It just, you can get the sense from where she's pulling that from, that it's just like this resuscitation of the buzzword general responses, which is pretty much what they all do these days. And so lastly, as he's talking about Somalia, let's just reiterate, this is from today. The U.S. bombed Somalia for the 102nd time this year. For what? Like, we're going to get into the next show about the overlap, the absurdity. They just claimed the U.S. government was bombing in Syria with the Syrian forces against ISIS. Oh, wait, you mean you're working with the Syrian government forces, whatever that even means today, that are the ones being bombed by Israel, while Israel's working with the ISIS elements and ISIS-linked gangs in Gaza. But you're working with the very government, the people they're bombing to go after ISIS. It's like, I don't even know what part of that's fake. They're just lying about everything. And what's crazy about it is really the overlap to Somalia is where I'm going with that, or even Sudan, is they're trying to kind of broaden this out to some new ISIS spin out when you can clearly prove that they're working with these people. I was expecting, which still may come, some kind of an Afghan ISIS K point, but maybe we beat that to death. Maybe they recognize that it's not going to work. Overall, I don't know how we can pretend this is anything other than exactly what it looks like, guys. This is ongoing war. It's the forever state or forever war state. You know, all the things that she claims it's not, it's right in front of you. Well, I'm hoping more people day by day can see these things. And rather, I know most do, I think, in my opinion, but rather have the courage to stand up and talk about it. Call it out, have conversations. You know, when people are sitting there telling you what they think, speak up. I know it's tough. I know it can be intense, especially from the blind, partisan, adherent people. If they look at you like you just stabbed their mother, but understand that you have to have these conversations. You're helping people. You realize how many people I talked to during the COVID-19 illusion that were like livid, seething at the fact that I was trying to tell them something that they needed. And I wasn't trying to push. I was just trying, look, I'm just trying to help. Like, if you don't want it, that's fine. But like, as if I was like destroying everything that mattered. And some of those people are the ones that have never stopped watching the show because they've now going, oh my God, I'm so grateful that and it's not just me, guys. It's plenty of us in this field that we're out there going, don't, just look at the evidence. I'm not saying I know everything, but this is clearly a problem. That's where we are right now. And I think everyone's beginning to get to this point that we need to see some momentum before the next thing happens, before the next transition, the next administration, the next technocratic string gets pulled. People need to start screaming about this. I'm never talking about violence, guys. Stand up. Thank you for tuning in today, guys. Keep screaming about this. Prospera, the overlap, the people he pardoned. We're watching this thing materialize in front of us. I'm telling you. And I it's going to break my heart if we're over here reporting about how this is happening, for how long we've been calling this out. But, I'm sure David Icke and plenty of others feel the same way right now of how long they've been calling this out. And I'll tell you what, Alex Jones is not one of them. Ask Bill Cooper. Thank you for tuning in tonight, guys. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.